They sold her like livestock because her womb was empty, but the rancher who bought her with a single coin was hiding something far more desperate than anyone knew. When Eliza Moreland stood trembling on that auction block, she thought her life was over. She was wrong. What happened next in that dusty New Mexico town would change 5 broken children, 1 haunted widower, and 1 barren woman forever. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The spring sun beat down mercilessly on Ash Ridge's town square, turning the packed dirt into a griddle that baked through the soles of every boot and shoe. Eliza Moreland stood on a wooden platform that had been hastily erected that morning, the same platform they use twice a year for livestock auctions. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Eliza herself. Her father, Gerald Moreland, stood beside her like a carnival barker, his voice carrying across the crowd with practiced ease. He'd been a horse trader before whiskey had stolen his steadiness, and he still knew how to work a crowd, even if that crowd was watching him sell his own daughter. "Gentlemen of Ash Ridge and beyond," Gerald's voice boomed, though there was a slight tremor beneath the bravado that only Eliza could detect. "Before you stands a woman of 22 years, educated by the Sisters of Mercy, skilled in all domestic arts. She can cook a meal fit for a governor, sew stitches finer than any tailor in Santa Fe, and she knows her place, which is to keep her mouth shut and her hands busy." A few men in the crowd chuckled. Eliza felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her eyes fixed on a point just above the horizon, where the Sangre de Cristo Mountains met the sky. Her mother had taught her that trick years ago, back when her mother still spoke to her, still acknowledged her existence. Look beyond them, Eliza. Look to where they can't follow, and they can't touch you. But her mother's wisdom felt hollow now. Nothing could protect her from this, nothing except the mercy of whatever man might take pity on her enough to offer a price. "Now, I know what you're all thinking," Gerald continued, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone as he leaned forward. "You're thinking, 'Gerald, why would a man like you be selling such a prize? What's wrong with her?'" The crowd murmured in agreement. This was the part they'd all been waiting for. In a town of 300 souls, there were no secrets, only different versions of the truth. Gerald straightened, his face arranging itself into an expression of practiced sorrow. "My daughter was married 3 years to Harold Pemberton, God rest his soul. A good man, a strong man, but the Lord saw fit to take him in a riding accident last autumn." Heads nodded. They all knew about Harold's death, thrown from his horse in a ravine, neck broken clean. Some whispered it had been suicide, that the shame of a barren wife had driven him to it. Others said he'd been drunk, like half the men in the territory. The truth, Eliza knew, was simpler and sadder. Harold had been a mediocre horseman who'd taken a trail too fast in fading light, and gravity had done the rest. "In those 3 years of marriage," Gerald continued, his voice dropping, "the Lord did not see fit to bless their union with children. The midwives confirmed it. The problem lies with her. She's barren as the Salt Flats, gentlemen, can't bear children, never will." The murmur in the crowd changed tone. Some men shifted uncomfortably, suddenly finding their boots fascinating. Others leaned in with renewed interest, a different kind of interest that made Eliza's skin crawl. "But," Gerald raised his hand, silencing the whispers, "but she's healthy. She's young enough yet. And she's got skills that would make any household run smooth as clockwork. A man doesn't need sons from every woman under his roof. Maybe you've got children already. Maybe you've got a mother or sister who needs help. Maybe you just need someone to cook and clean and not complain about the life you offer her." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then he named his price. "I'm asking $50, that's all. $50 for a lifetime of service. A woman who will be grateful for whatever roof you put over her head, whatever food you see fit to provide. $50, gentlemen. Who'll start the bidding?" Silence fell over the square like a burial shroud. Eliza had known this moment was coming, had prepared herself for it all morning as her mother had braided her hair with rough, angry movements. But knowing and experiencing were 2 different things. The silence stretched and stretched, each second an eternity of humiliation. A cough from the back of the crowd. The creak of wagon wheels as someone shifted their weight. A baby crying in someone's arms, quickly shushed, but no bids. "Come now," Gerald said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. $40. That's a steal, gentlemen. $40 and she's yours tonight. Papers all legal, blessed by Father Martinez himself. More silence. Eliza could feel her father's desperation radiating beside her like heat from a stove. Her mother stood at the edge of the crowd, her face carved from stone, refusing to meet Eliza's eyes. Her younger brother, Thomas, was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in the saloon, unable to watch this degradation of his sister. $30, Gerald said, his voice cracking now. $30, gentlemen. That's less than a decent horse, less than a month's whiskey money. Surely one of you needs... Does she know how to handle children? The voice came from the back of the crowd, deep and rough as creek gravel. The assembled people parted slightly, creating a corridor through which a man walked forward with measured, unhurried steps. Eliza's eyes flicked to him despite herself. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with shoulders that spoke of years of hard labor. His clothes were clean but worn, mended in several places with stitches that looked self-administered and practical rather than pretty. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but she could see a strong jaw darkened with several days of beard growth, and eyes that were a startling shade of blue-gray, like winter sky. "Yes!" Gerald seized on the question like a drowning man grabbing a rope. "Yes, she's wonderful with children. She helped raise her younger brother, and she's got a gentle hand, patient as Job himself." The tall man stopped a few feet from the platform. Up close, Eliza could see the lines around his eyes, not from age, but from squinting into sun and wind. He couldn't have been more than 35, but he carried himself with the weariness of someone much older. "How old are the children she's cared for?" the man asked, his eyes fixed on Gerald, not Eliza. She felt oddly grateful for that. "Oh, all ages," Gerald improvised wildly. "Babes to near grown. She's got away with them, you understand. Natural instinct." "I asked her," the man said quietly, and now his eyes did shift to Eliza. "Not you." The square went utterly silent. No one spoke to Gerald Moreland that way, not in public, not when he was already humiliated by having to sell his daughter like livestock. But Gerald, surprisingly, shut his mouth. "Well, miss?" The tall man's voice was gentle, but there was steel underneath it. "How old were the children you've cared for?" Eliza's throat was dry. She hadn't expected to be asked a direct question, hadn't prepared for actual conversation. "My brother Thomas," she managed, her voice rough from disuse. "I helped raise him from when he was born until he was old enough for school. He's 16 now." The man nodded slowly. "Just the one, then?" "Yes, sir, just the one." She paused, then added, "But I helped at the church sometimes. Father Martinez would bring children from families that were struggling. I'd watch them during services, keep them quiet and fed." "Ages?" "Young ones, mostly, walking to about 8 years old." The man was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those winter sky eyes. Eliza felt herself being assessed, measured, but not in the way the other men in the crowd had looked at her. He wasn't evaluating her hips or her face or her potential for warming a bed. He was looking at something else, something she couldn't quite define. "She can't have children," Gerald interjected, clearly worried that this potential buyer was losing interest. "I want to be clear about that, so there's no dispute later. The midwives confirmed it after 3 years of marriage produced nothing. If you're looking for a woman to give you sons, you'll need to look elsewhere." "I have sons," the man said simply. 5 children total. Their mother died 16 months ago, influenza. A wave of understanding rippled through the crowd. Several women made sympathetic noises. Losing a wife to influenza was common enough, but 5 children without a mother. That was a tragedy that hit different. 5? Gerald's eyes lit up. "Well then, sir, you're looking at exactly what you need. $30 and she's yours, ready to mother those children like they were her own flesh and blood." The man's jaw tightened slightly at that, but he didn't respond to Gerald. Instead, he kept his attention on Eliza. "What's your name?" "Eliza, sir. Eliza Moreland. Was Pemberton, but..." She trailed off. She'd reclaimed her maiden name after Harold's death, unable to bear the weight of the Pemberton family's judgment any longer. "Eliza," he repeated, testing the name. Then, after another long moment of consideration, He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, he extracted a single coin, a silver dollar, and placed it on the edge of the platform with a soft clink. The crowd gasped. Gerald's face went purple. "Now see here," Gerald sputtered. "I said $30. That's $1. One. That's an insult, sir, and I'll not have my daughter—" "This is all she's worth in this town," the man interrupted, his voice still quiet but carrying an edge now. "Because in this town, she's been judged and found wanting through no fault of her own. She's been called barren, useless, a burden. You're selling her because you're ashamed of her. Every person in this square knows it." Gerald's mouth worked soundlessly, his face shifting from purple to an alarming shade of red. The tall man continued, his eyes now moving to the crowd. "If any man here valued her for her skills, her character, her humanity, you'd have bid already. But you haven't. Because all you see is a woman who can't bear children. And in your eyes, that makes her worthless." He paused. "So I'm offering $1, which is $1 more than anyone else values her at. And when she leaves here with me, she won't be judged anymore. Not in my house. Not by my children. Not by me." The square was so quiet that Eliza could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She stared at this stranger, this tall rancher with winter eyes and a voice like distant thunder, and felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been frozen solid since the day the midwife had confirmed what Harold's mother had been whispering for years. That's robbery." Gerald finally found his voice. "Highway robbery. I'll have the sheriff's standing right over there," the man said, nodding toward a portly figure at the edge of the crowd. "And he can confirm that this is a legal transaction. You set the terms yourself. Any man with coin can take her tonight. I've got coin. I'm taking her. Unless," he added, turning back to face Gerald directly, "you'd like to call off the sale entirely and take your daughter home with the dignity she deserves?" It was a challenge, plainly spoken. "Keep your daughter and admit you were wrong to sell her, or take the dollar and live with the shame of it." Gerald Moreland had never been a man who chose dignity over profit, no matter how small. His hand shot out and snatched the silver dollar from the platform. "She's yours," he said hoarsely, "and good riddance. Papers will be drawn up by sundown." The tall man nodded once, then turned to Eliza. "I'm Bo Thatcher. I have a ranch about 8 miles northeast near the canyon rim. I need help with my children. They're hurting, and I can't reach them the way their mother could. I can offer you a room of your own, 3 meals a day, and $1 a week for personal necessities. In exchange, I need you to care for the house and the children. Just that. Nothing else." The way he emphasized those last 2 words made his meaning clear. Eliza felt tension she hadn't known she was carrying release from her shoulders. "I understand, Mr. Thatcher," she said softly. "Can you ride?" "Yes, sir." "Not well, but I can stay on a horse." "Good enough. I've got a wagon. Collect whatever belongs to you. We're leaving now." "Now?" Eliza blinked. "But the papers—" "Will be delivered to my ranch when they're ready. I'm not leaving you here 1 minute longer than necessary." Bo Thatcher's voice was firm, brooking no argument. Eliza looked toward her mother, hoping for— what? A goodbye? A moment of reconciliation? But her mother had already turned away, disappearing into the crowd with her shoulders rigid and her head held high, as if she could walk away from the shame of this day through sheer force of will. Her father had pocketed his dollar and was already heading toward the saloon, no doubt planning to drink away his humiliation. "I'll just—" Eliza's voice faltered. "My things are at my parents' house. It's just a few minutes." "I'll come with you," Bo said, "so there's no trouble." They walked through the parting crowd in silence, Eliza acutely aware of the eyes following them, the whispers starting up like wildfire in their wake, Mrs. Henderson clutching her rosary and murmuring prayers, Old Man Sawyer shaking his head in disgust, though whether at her father or at Bo's $1 bid, she couldn't tell. The Martin twins, barely 18, watching with wide eyes that would fuel gossip for weeks. The Moreland house sat at the end of a dusty street, small and shabby with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Eliza had grown up in this house, but it had never felt like home, more like a way station, a temporary place she was expected to leave as soon as some man claimed her. Well, someone had claimed her now. She pushed open the door. It was never locked, and went directly to the small room she'd occupied since returning from her brief marriage to Harold. Her possessions fit into a single carpet bag, 2 dresses, one for every day and one for church. Undergarments that she'd mended so many times they were more patched than original fabric. A brush with half its bristles missing, a small Bible her grandmother had given her, and a tin locket containing a tiny portrait of her mother from happier days. She paused over the locket, her thumb tracing the tarnished surface. Her mother had given it to her on her wedding day, pressing it into her palm with a kiss to her forehead, the last tender gesture between them before Harold's mother had started making pronouncements about Eliza's deficiency, and her own mother had withdrawn into cold silence rather than defend her daughter. Eliza fastened the locket around her neck, tucking it beneath her collar where it rested against her heart like a coal of mixed warmth and pain. When she emerged from her room, Beau was standing in the front hallway, his hat in his hands, looking at the faded photographs on the wall. He turned as she appeared, his eyes going to the small carpet bag. "That's everything?" "Yes, sir." Something flickered across his face, pity, maybe, or anger on her behalf, but he didn't comment on how little she owned. Instead, he simply nodded and held the door open for her. "After you, Miss Moreland." The wagon was parked in front of the general store, a sturdy buckboard with worn but well-maintained wheels. 2 horses stood patiently in their traces, their coats dull with dust from the road. Beau helped Eliza up onto the bench seat with a brief touch to her elbow, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. They left Ash Ridge behind without ceremony, the wagon wheels crunching over the packed dirt road as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. Eliza didn't look back. There was nothing in that town she wanted to remember. For the first hour, they rode in silence. The landscape rolled past, scrub brush and scattered pinon pines, red rock formations jutting up from the earth like the bones of ancient giants. The air smelled of dust and sage, carried on a wind that never quite stopped blowing in this part of the territory. Eliza kept her hands folded in her lap, her carpet bag tucked securely at her feet. She wanted to ask questions about the children, about the ranch, about what exactly would be expected of her, but the silence felt too fragile to break. Beau Thatcher drove with the easy competence of someone who'd made this journey 1,000 times, his attention on the road ahead. Finally, as the sun touched the mountain peaks and painted the sky in shades of orange and deep purple, Beau spoke. "The children," he said, his voice rough from disuse, "they're not easy right now. The oldest, James, he's 12, thinks he's the man of the house since I'm gone so much managing the ranch. Then there's Matthew, he's 9, and he's angry at everything, at me for not saving their mother, at God for taking her, at the world for keep spinning when his stopped." Eliza listened, not interrupting. "Levi's 7, Beau continued, quietest child you'll ever meet. Hasn't said more than a dozen words since the funeral. The twins are 5, Nathaniel and Mira. Mira's the only girl." He paused, his jaw tightening. "She doesn't understand why her mama doesn't come when she calls. Keeps asking when she's coming home." "And you tell her?" "The truth. That her mama's with God now, that she's not coming back. But truth doesn't mean understanding, not at 5 years old." Beau's hands tightened on the reins. "My wife," Catherine was her name, "she was the heart of everything. The house, the family, the whole ranch. When she died, it was like someone ripped the center out of our world and expected us all to just keep standing." "I'm sorry," Eliza said softly. "That's a terrible loss." "Yes." Beau was quiet for another long moment. Then, "I need to be clear about something, Miss Moreland. I didn't bring you to my ranch to replace Catherine. No one could do that. And I didn't bring you to be my wife. I'm not ready for that, may never be ready for it. I brought you because my children are drowning in grief, and I can't reach them. I'm not good with words, never have been. I can mend a fence, deliver a calf, break a horse, but I can't fix what's broken in my children's hearts." "I don't know if I can either," Eliza admitted. "I've never lost anyone the way they've lost their mother. I don't know if I'm capable of—" "I'm not asking you to fix them," Beau interrupted gently. "I'm just asking you to be there, to keep the house from falling apart, to make sure they eat and wash and sleep, to be a steady presence when everything else feels like it's crumbling. Can you do that?" Eliza thought about it, really thought about it. She'd spent the last year feeling like a failure, marked as defective by every person who'd known about her inability to conceive. She'd been measured against a standard she could never meet and found wanting every single time. But this man, this stranger who'd bought her for $1 and promised she wouldn't be judged anymore, was asking her to do something she might actually be capable of. Not to give birth, not to provide heirs, just to show up, to be present, to care. "Yes," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Yes, I can do that." Bo nodded, something like relief crossing his weather-beaten features. "Good, that's good." They rode on as twilight deepened into true night. Stars began appearing overhead, more stars than Eliza had ever seen from town, painting the sky in swaths of silver light. The temperature dropped quickly, as it always did in the high desert, and Eliza wrapped her thin shawl more tightly around her shoulders. Without a word, Bo reached behind the seat and pulled out a heavy wool blanket, offering it to her. "Thank you," Eliza murmured, draping it across her lap. It smelled of horse and leather and wood smoke, the scent of someone else's life, someone else's home. She was entering a world that had already been built without her, trying to fit into a space carved out by a dead woman's absence. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt a strange sense of calm settling over her shoulders like the blanket. Maybe it was because the expectations were clear and achievable. Maybe it was because Bo Thatcher had looked at her with winter sky eyes and seen something other than her barrenness. Maybe it was simply because anything, absolutely anything, was better than standing on that platform while her own father sold her to the highest bidder, or in this case, the only bidder. "There," Bo said, pointing ahead. "That's home." Eliza followed his gesture and saw lights flickering in the distance, lantern light, warm and yellow against the darkness. As they drew closer, she could make out the shape of buildings: a main house, a barn, several outbuildings clustered together like a small settlement carved out of the wilderness. The house itself was larger than she'd expected, a 2-story structure with a wide porch wrapping around the front. It looked solid, well built, though even in the darkness she could see signs of neglect: peeling paint, a shutter hanging loose, weeds growing up through the porch steps. A house without a woman's hand for 16 months would show such signs. Bo brought the wagon to a stop in front of the porch and set the brake. Before Eliza could move, the front door burst open and children spilled out, all 5 of them, illuminated by the lantern light behind them, staring at the wagon with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. "Pa!" The smallest one, Mira, Eliza guessed, ran down the steps despite the loose boards. "You were gone forever and ever." "Just since this morning, baby girl," Bo said, his voice softening in a way it hadn't during their entire journey. He climbed down from the wagon and swept the little girl up into his arms. "Were you good for James?" "She was a terror," said the tallest boy. James, clearly, with his father's build already showing in his shoulders and his mother's dark hair, his eyes fixed on Eliza with unmistakable suspicion. "Who's that?" "This is Miss Eliza Moreland," Bo said, setting Mira down and turning to help Eliza from the wagon. "She's going to be staying with us, helping with the house and looking after you children while I'm working." "We don't need looking after," James said flatly. "I've been managing just fine." "You burned the biscuits again this morning," piped up one of the twins, a boy with a gap-toothed grin. "And you put salt in the coffee instead of sugar." "Shut up, Nathaniel." "Boys," Bo's voice carried a warning. "Mind your manners. Miss Moreland, these are my sons, James, Matthew, Levi, and Nathaniel, and this is Mira." Eliza climbed down from the wagon, clutching her carpet bag, and faced the children. James was scowling openly. Matthew, the 9-year-old, stood with his arms crossed, and his jaw set in a way that reminded her painfully of her own brother when he was angry. Levi, true to his father's description, watched her with enormous eyes, but said nothing. The twins stood together, Nathaniel curious and Mira partially hiding behind her brother. "Hello," Eliza said, unsure whether to smile or maintain a serious expression. "I'm pleased to meet you all." Silence. The children stared at her like she was a puzzle they didn't particularly want to solve. "Is she going to be our new ma?" Mira asked, her voice small. "No," Bo said firmly. "Your ma is your ma, always will be. Miss Eliza is here to help, that's all." "We don't need help," James repeated, but there was less conviction in his voice now. He looked tired, Eliza realized, bone-deep tired in the way that came from carrying too much weight for too long. "Well, you've got it anyway," Bo said. "Now, James, take Miss Moreland's bag and show her to the spare room. The rest of you bed. It's late." "But bed. Now." The children dispersed, though not without plenty of foot-dragging and mutinous looks. James snatched Eliza's carpet-bag with barely contained hostility and disappeared into the house. The others followed, casting looks back over their shoulders. Bo waited until they were inside, then turned to Eliza. In the lantern light, his face looked haggard, older than it had in the harsh sun of Ash Ridge. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "They're not usually this rude, they're just protecting themselves," Eliza finished. "I understand. I'm a stranger, coming into their home, into their mother's space. Of course they're suspicious." Bo looked at her for a long moment, something like surprise flickering in his winter sky eyes. "You do understand." "I know what it's like to feel like the world is against you," Eliza said simply. "I know what it's like to build walls just to survive. Those children have walls I can't even see yet. But Mr. Thatcher, I meant what I said. I'll show up. I'll be here, whether they accept me or not." For the first time since she'd met him, Bo Thatcher smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but it transformed his face from stern to almost gentle. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you settled." The interior of the house spoke of recent chaos and long-term neglect. Dishes were piled in the kitchen basin. Clothes hung haphazardly over chairbacks. The floor needed sweeping, and dust coated every surface that wasn't in daily use. But underneath the disorder, Eliza could see the bones of a well-loved home. Handmade curtains, now faded. A dining table scarred with use but solidly built. Children's drawings pinned to the walls with careful placement. James was waiting at the top of the stairs, her carpetbag at his feet. "This is your room," he said shortly, pushing open a door. The room was small but clean, with a single window looking out over the front yard. A bed, a dresser, a washstand. Simple furnishings, but more than Eliza had expected. Someone, probably James, had made up the bed with sheets that smelled of sage and sunshine. "Thank you," Eliza said, meaning it. James's expression didn't soften. "My ma's things are in the attic. Pa couldn't bear to move them, so they're just sitting up there gathering dust. You're not to touch them. You're not to go in their bedroom, and you're not to think you can just walk in here and take her place, because you can't." Each word was like a small stone thrown with precision, meant to hurt. But Eliza had been hurt by experts, Harold's mother, her own parents, the whole town of Ash Ridge. A 12-year-old boy's anger, no matter how justified, couldn't touch her the way their judgment had. "I'm not here to take anyone's place, James," she said quietly. "I'm here to help, that's all." "We'll see," James said, and turned on his heel, leaving her alone in the small room with her carpetbag and her thoughts. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling slightly now that she was finally alone. The enormity of what had happened today was beginning to sink in. This morning, she'd woken in her childhood bedroom in Ash Ridge, knowing her father planned to sell her but not believing it would actually happen. Tonight, she was in a stranger's house, 8 miles from everything she'd ever known, responsible for 5 grieving children who wanted nothing to do with her. She pulled the locket from beneath her collar and opened it, looking at the tiny portrait of her mother. The woman in the picture was smiling, young, full of hope. Nothing like the cold stranger who'd turned away from her in the square today. "I'm sorry, Mama," Eliza thought. "I'm sorry I couldn't be what you wanted. I'm sorry I'm broken." But even as she thought it, Bo Thatcher's words echoed in her memory. "She won't be judged anymore. Not in my house. Maybe broken was all right here. Maybe broken could still be useful." Eliza changed into her nightgown, washed her face in the basin, and crawled between the sage-scented sheets. Through the thin walls, she could hear the sounds of the house settling, floorboards creaking, a child coughing, the distant sound of Bo's boots on the stairs. Tomorrow, she thought, she would begin the work of earning her place here. Tomorrow, she would face whatever challenges these children threw at her. Tomorrow, she would prove that a woman didn't need a working womb to have value. But tonight, alone in a strange room in a house full of grief, Eliza Moreland let herself cry for everything she'd lost and everything she might never have. She cried for her marriage, for her parents' love, for the children her body would never create. She cried for the woman she'd been expected to be and the woman she actually was. And somewhere in the depths of that grief, she found the smallest spark of something else. Not hope, exactly. Not yet, but possibility. The possibility that here, in this broken house with these broken children and this broken man, she might finally find a place where being broken was enough. Outside her window, the desert night sang with crickets and the distant howl of coyotes. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human suffering, indifferent to human joy. And in the small room at the top of the stairs, Eliza Moreland closed her eyes and let exhaustion carry her into dreamless sleep. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Tomorrow, with all its trials and terrors and tiny mercies. Tomorrow, she would begin again. Dawn broke across the New Mexico territory with the subtlety of a hammer strike, all harsh light and immediate heat even in the early hours. Eliza woke to unfamiliar sounds, a rooster crowing somewhere close by, the lowing of cattle in the distance, and the unmistakable thunder of children's feet on wooden stairs. She sat up, momentarily disoriented by the strange room, the strange bed, the strange life she'd stepped into less than 12 hours ago. Her first instinct was to lie back down, to pull the covers over her head and pretend yesterday had been nothing more than a fever dream. But the sounds of the waking household wouldn't allow for cowardice. Eliza dressed quickly in her everyday dress, a faded calico that had seen better years, and braided her hair with fingers that still trembled slightly. Through the thin walls, she could hear voices raised in argument. "I told you to watch the stove, Matthew." "I did watch it. It's not my fault the pan was too hot." Everything's always someone else's fault with you, isn't it?" "Shut up, James. You're not Pa." "Boys, please." That last voice was smaller, younger, one of the twins, maybe. Eliza steeled herself and opened her door, stepping into the chaos that was apparently a normal Thatcher morning. The kitchen was a disaster of smoking pans, scattered flour, and 5 children in various states of dress and distress. James stood at the stove, wielding a spatula like a weapon, his face flushed with frustration and heat. Matthew sat at the table with his arms crossed, scowling at the world. Levi hovered near the window, watching everything with those enormous silent eyes. And the twins, both still in their nightclothes, were attempting to set the table with more enthusiasm than skill, resulting in forks scattered across the floor like autumn leaves. "Good morning," Eliza said, pitching her voice to carry over the commotion without shouting. 5 heads swiveled toward her. The room went abruptly, unnaturally quiet. "Pa's already out with the cattle," James said finally, his tone making it clear this was a warning, not just information. "He left before sunup. Said to tell you there's eggs in the coop, milk in the cold cellar, and flour in the pantry." "Thank you." Eliza moved into the kitchen, assessing the damage. Burned eggs in one pan, what looked like the remains of an attempted pancake in another. Coffee, boiling over on the back burner, filling the room with a bitter smell. "May I?" James stepped back from the stove with obvious relief masquerading as indifference. "Suit yourself." Eliza had learned to cook in her mother's kitchen under the strict tutelage of a woman who believed that proper food preparation was a woman's highest calling. She'd never particularly enjoyed it, but she knew her way around a stove. She removed the ruined pans, dumped the coffee, which was more sludge than beverage, and started fresh. The children watched her in silence, their expressions ranging from James's barely concealed hostility to Mira's wide-eyed curiosity. "Nathaniel, Mira," Eliza said as she measured coffee grounds, "could you pick up those forks and put them in the basin? We'll need to wash them before we use them." The twins looked at each other, then at James, clearly seeking permission. When he didn't object, they scurried to obey, treating it like a game to see who could collect the most forks. "Matthew," Eliza continued, finding eggs in a basket near the door, "would you mind fetching water from the pump? We'll need it for washing up." "Get it yourself," Matthew said, not moving from his chair. Eliza paused, an egg in each hand, and turned to look at the 9-year-old properly. His jaw was set, his eyes bright with challenge. This was a test, she realized. Push too hard and she'd lose him completely. Back down and she'd never earn his respect. "All right," she said mildly, turning back to her work. "I'll get it myself in a moment." Though I have to say, your father struck me as the kind of man who raises children with better manners than that. It was a gamble, invoking Beau's authority when he wasn't present to back her up, but something in the boy's expression flickered. Shame, maybe, or the ghost of remembered lessons about courtesy. He stood up so abruptly his chair scraped across the floor. "Fine," he muttered, grabbing the water bucket and stalking out the back door. Small victory. Eliza allowed herself a mental note of it before cracking eggs into a bowl. Beside her, James was studiously ignoring her presence, but she could feel his attention tracking her every move. "Your mother must have been a wonderful cook," Eliza ventured, whisking the eggs with a fork. "This is a well-organized kitchen. Everything has its place." "She was the best," Mira piped up, her voice carrying that peculiar combination of pride and pain that children use when talking about lost parents. "She made cinnamon rolls every Sunday, and her stew was better than anyone's in the whole territory." "Mira," James said sharply, "don't." "But it's true. And she sang while she cooked, and she let us help sometimes, and—" "I said don't!" James's voice cracked like a whip, and Mira's face crumpled. The little girl fled from the kitchen, her bare feet slapping against the wooden floor as she ran toward the stairs. The silence that followed was suffocating. James stood rigid, his hands clenched into fists, his face a mask of anger barely containing grief. Nathaniel had frozen mid-fork collection, looking between his oldest brother and the doorway where his sister had disappeared. Even Levi, silent Levi, had turned from the window to stare. "I'll go talk to her," Eliza said quietly. "You'll leave her alone," James shot back. "You don't know anything about her. You don't know anything about any of us." "You're right," Eliza agreed, setting down her whisk. "I don't know you. I don't know what your mother was like, or how much you miss her, or how angry you are that I'm here in her kitchen, using her pans, trying to fill a space that was never meant to be empty." She met James's eyes steadily. "But I know what it's like to hurt James, and I know that taking that hurt out on your little sister isn't going to make it better. So I'm going to go check on her, and you're going to let me because that's what your father asked me to do." For a moment, she thought James might physically block her path. His whole body vibrated with the need to assert control, to maintain the fragile order he'd built in the 16 months since his mother's death. But something in Eliza's calm refusal to be cowed must have reached him, because he stepped aside. "Don't expect her to like you," he said, his voice low and harsh. "Don't expect any of us to like you." "I don't," Eliza said honestly. "I just expect you to let me try." She found Mira in the room she apparently shared with her brothers, a cramped space with 2 sets of bunk beds and clothes strewn across every surface. The little girl was curled on the bottom bunk, clutching a rag doll that had seen better days, her small shoulders shaking with sobs. Eliza stood in the doorway for a moment, remembering her own childhood tears, the way her mother had sometimes held her and sometimes told her to stop being dramatic. She wasn't sure which approach would work here, or if any approach would work at all. But she'd told James she would try, and so she would try. "Mira?" Eliza lowered herself to sit on the floor beside the bed, not touching, just present. "Your brother didn't mean to yell at you. He's just hurting." "He's always mean now," Mira hiccuped into her doll. "He used to be nice before Mama died. He used to play with us and tell stories and make us laugh. Now he just yells all the time." "Grief does strange things to people," Eliza said softly. "It makes them angry at the wrong things, at the wrong people. Your brother's not really angry at you, sweetheart. He's angry at the world for taking your mother away. But you're here, and the world isn't, so sometimes the anger lands on you instead." Mira turned her tear-stained face toward Eliza, considering this. "Are you grieving too? Is that why you're here?" The question, asked with such innocent directness, hit Eliza like a physical blow. "In a way," she admitted. "I lost something too. Not a person, but a life I thought I was supposed to have. And when I lost it, I felt very angry and very sad, just like you feel about your mama." "Did it make you mean?" "Sometimes. I think sometimes I was mean to myself, in my head, telling myself I wasn't good enough, that I'd failed." Eliza paused, choosing her words carefully. "But then your father gave me a chance to try something different, to help someone instead of just feeling sorry for myself." Do you think that was a good thing for him to do? Mira nodded slowly, her fingers worrying at the doll's yarn hair. Mama always said helping people was the best medicine for sad hearts. Your mama sounds like she was very wise. She was the best mama in the whole world, Mira declared, fresh tears welling up. And I miss her so much my chest hurts, and nobody understands, not even Pa, because he's always working and he doesn't have time to talk about Mama anymore. Eliza's heart broke a little at that, at the image of this little girl carrying such a massive weight of grief with nowhere to put it down. She didn't have Bo's permission to make promises, didn't have the right to offer things that weren't hers to give, but she couldn't just sit here and do nothing. I can't be your mama, Mira, Eliza said gently. No one can be her except her, and she's gone. And that's the worst kind of unfair, but I can listen if you want to talk about her. I can hold your hand when the missing gets too big. I can make sure you eat breakfast and get tucked in at night and have clean clothes to wear. Would that be all right? Would that be a help? Mira studied her with those enormous blue eyes, her father's eyes, weighing Eliza's words with the gravity of a much older person. Finally, she nodded. I guess that would be all right. But I'm still going to miss Mama. Of course you are, Eliza said. You should miss her. Missing her means you loved her, and love doesn't stop just because someone's gone. Really? Really? Mira sat up, wiping her nose on her nightgown sleeve in a way that suggested she'd been missing maternal guidance for longer than 16 months. Are you going to make breakfast? James always burns it. I was in the middle of making eggs when I came up here, Eliza said, pushing herself to her feet with a slight groan. Would you like to help me finish? The little girl's face brightened immediately. Mama used to let me crack eggs. I'm very good at it. Well, mostly good at it. Sometimes the shells get in there, but Pa says that's just extra crunch. Eliza held out her hand, and after only a moment's hesitation, Mira took it. Her small fingers were warm and slightly sticky, her grip surprisingly strong. Together, they descended the stairs and returned to the kitchen, where the boys had apparently negotiated a temporary truce in their absence. Matthew had returned with the water, though he'd slopped a good amount of it across the floor in the process. James had managed to scrape the burned remnants from the pans and was making a half-hearted attempt at setting the table properly. Levi remained at his post by the window, and Nathaniel was trying to fold napkins into elaborate shapes with more ambition than skill. Mira's going to help me finish breakfast, Eliza announced, guiding the little girl to a stool beside the stove. The rest of you, go get dressed properly. Breakfast will be ready in 15 minutes. You can't tell us what to do, Matthew said, but there was less conviction in it now, more rote recitation of an expected response. You're right. I can't force you to do anything, Eliza agreed pleasantly, pouring the whisked eggs into a heated pan slicked with butter. But I can choose not to serve breakfast to anyone who comes to the table in their nightclothes. House rules apply to everyone equally, or they don't apply at all. James's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but something that might become one eventually. Come on, he told his brothers. You heard her, and you know Pa would say the same thing. The boys trooped out, leaving Eliza alone with Mira and the steadily cooking eggs. The little girl proved to be surprisingly capable in the kitchen, directing Eliza to the right cupboards for plates and the right drawer for utensils, chattering all the while about how her mother used to organize things, and why everything was where it was. And this spoon, Mira said, holding up a wooden spoon worn smooth with use. This was Mama's favorite for stirring stew. She said it was lucky because Grandma gave it to her when she married Pa, and it had never broken or burned no matter how many pots of stew she made. Eliza took the spoon carefully, feeling the weight of it, the history embedded in its smooth wood. Then we should use it for something special, she said. What if we make stew for dinner tonight? Would you help me? Mira's whole face lit up. Really? You'll let me help with Mama's stew? If you teach me how she made it. I've never made stew in this kitchen before. I'll need a good teacher. The little girl practically vibrated with excitement. I know where she kept her recipe box. I'll show you after breakfast. By the time the boys returned, all dressed now, though Matthew's shirt was inside out, and Nathaniel had managed to button his vest wrong, Eliza had produced a passable breakfast of scrambled eggs, toasted bread, and fresh coffee that actually tasted like coffee instead of mud. It wasn't fancy, and it certainly wasn't the feast these children were probably used to from their mother, but it was hot and plentiful, and no one complained. Well, no one complained out loud. The look Matthew shot at his eggs suggested he was mentally cataloging every way they failed to meet his standards. But he ate them anyway, which Eliza counted as another small victory. Bo returned as they were finishing up, his hat dusty and his boots caked with mud from the fields. He paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Children fed and dressed, kitchen more or less clean, Eliza at the stove washing the last of the pans. "Miss Moreland," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "You're up early." "The rooster was very insistent about that," Eliza replied, drying her hands on a towel that had definitely seen better days. "The children have eaten. There's coffee if you'd like some, and I can make you a plate." "No need. I ate before dawn." Bo removed his hat, running a hand through hair that was showing the first threads of silver at the temples. "But thank you. How did everything go?" His eyes flicked to his children as he asked, the real question underneath the polite words, "Did they make it impossible? Did they break you already?" "We managed just fine," Eliza said. "Mira was very helpful in showing me where things were kept. And we're planning to make stew for dinner tonight, if that's agreeable to you." Something complicated crossed Bo's face at that. Pain, maybe, or memory. "Catherine's stew was always my favorite," he said quietly. "Then we'll do our best to make it as good as she did," Eliza said, meeting his eyes steadily. "Mira tells me her mother kept a recipe box." "In the pantry, top shelf." Bo was quiet for a moment, then seemed to shake himself. "I need to head back out. There's fence line that needs mending before the cattle find the weak spots. James, you're with me. Matthew, I need you to feed the chickens and collect eggs. Nathaniel, you're on mucking duty in the barn. Levi," he paused, looking at his quietest son, "help Miss Moreland with whatever she needs. Can you do that?" Levi nodded silently, his enormous eyes solemn. "And Mira, you help your brother and Miss Moreland. Mind your manners and do as you're told." Bo settled his hat back on his head and turned toward the door, then paused. "Miss Moreland, if you need anything, ring the bell on the back porch. 2 long rings means trouble. Otherwise, I'll be back for dinner." "We'll be fine," Eliza assured him, with more confidence than she felt. Bo studied her for another long moment, as if weighing whether to believe her, then nodded and headed out with James trailing behind him, the 12-year-old's shoulders already taking on the set of a man's burden. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of domestic activity. Eliza discovered that the Thatcher household was desperately in need of the kind of deep cleaning that only happened when someone cared enough to notice the details. 16 months of grieving men and children had left its mark, dust in the corners, stains on the floors, windows that hadn't been properly washed in seasons. But underneath the neglect, she found evidence of Catherine Thatcher's careful stewardship. Carefully mended curtains, hand-embroidered dish towels, a sampler on the wall that read, "Bless this home," in neat cross-stitch. Every sign of a woman who had loved this place, who had poured her heart into making it more than just a house. Eliza worked steadily through the chaos, teaching Mira and the reluctant Nathaniel how to properly sweep a floor, how to dust without just moving the dirt from one place to another, how to shake out rugs and hang them to air. Levi shadowed them silently, occasionally picking up dropped items or moving furniture without being asked, his contribution wordless but appreciated. Matthew finished his chicken duties and disappeared to sulk somewhere. Eliza didn't press it. The boy needed space to feel whatever he was feeling, and she wasn't going to chase him down like a truant. By noon, the main room looked almost civilized. Eliza stood in the center of it, hands on her hips surveying their work. The floors gleamed, the windows let in actual sunlight instead of filtered murk, and the air smelled of lemon oil and soap instead of stale grief. "It looks like it used to," Mira said softly, standing beside her. "When Mama was here." "Your Mama had good taste," Eliza said, "and she took care of things. We're just continuing what she started." Lunch was a simple affair of bread and cheese and apples from the cold cellar, eaten around the table with considerably less tension than breakfast had held. Even Matthew showed up, though he sat as far from Eliza as possible and refused to make eye contact. After lunch, Eliza sent the children outside to play, or in Matthew's case, to brood somewhere in the fresh air instead of inside, and set about tackling the stew. Catherine Thatcher's recipe box was exactly where Bo had said it would be, a carefully crafted wooden container with her initials carved into the lid. Opening it felt invasive, like reading someone's diary. These were Catherine's recipes, written in her own hand, splattered with years of cooking stains and kitchen accidents. Each card was a piece of her life, her knowledge passed down through ink and paper. The stew recipe was near the front, written in careful script. Mother Thatcher's beef stew. Use the tough cuts, they taste better. Don't rush the browning. Let it simmer until the meat falls apart. Add love and patience in equal measure. That last line made Eliza's throat tight. She could almost see Catherine standing at this stove, writing those words, believing that love and patience were ingredients that mattered as much as beef and carrots. Can I help? Mira had appeared at her elbow, quiet as a cat. Of course, Eliza said, swallowing past the emotion. You can be my assistant chef. First thing we need is meat from the cold cellar. Think you can show me where that is? Together, they gathered ingredients. Tough beef that needed slow cooking, potatoes from the root cellar, carrots and onions, herbs from the dried bundles hanging in the pantry. Mira narrated her mother's methods as they worked, her small voice carrying the weight of precious memories. Mama always sang when she cut up vegetables, Mira offered, watching Eliza chop onions. Said it made the time go faster and the food taste better. What did she sing? All kinds of things, church hymns sometimes, but mostly this one song about a mockingbird. I don't remember all the words, but it went like this. Mira hummed a few bars of a melody that was probably Hush Little Baby, her pitch uncertain but her enthusiasm absolute. Eliza found herself humming along, then quietly singing the words she remembered from her own childhood. Her voice was nothing special, serviceable but plain, but it filled the kitchen with something other than silence and grief. By the time Bo and James returned, dusty and tired from their fence mending, the house smelled like home, like beef and herbs and fresh-baked biscuits, like effort and care, and the beginnings of healing. Bo stood in the doorway again, but this time his expression was different. Not surprise, but something deeper, something that looked almost like pain. Pa? James touched his father's arm. You all right? Fine, Bo said hoarsely. Just smells like it used to, that's all. He didn't say more, just moved to wash up at the basin. But Eliza saw the way his hand shook slightly as he worked the pump, the way he kept his face turned away from his children so they wouldn't see whatever emotion was threatening to unmoor him. Dinner was a quiet affair, tension threaded through every bite. The stew was good, not perfect, but good, and the children ate with the kind of focus that suggested they'd been half-starved for this particular comfort food. Even Matthew managed 3 helpings, though he still refused to acknowledge Eliza directly. This is just like Mama's, Mira announced happily. Miss Eliza made it from Mama's recipe, and I helped. It's very good, Bo said, his voice carefully neutral. Thank you, Miss Moreland. Mira did most of the work, Eliza demurred. She knew exactly how her mother made it. I just followed instructions. James looked up at that, something shifting in his expression. Not acceptance, not yet, but maybe the first crack in his armor. You used Ma's recipe box? With your father's permission, yes. Eliza met the boy's eyes. Your mother's recipes are treasures, James. They deserve to be used, to keep feeding this family the way she would have wanted. I hope that's all right. James didn't answer immediately, turning the question over in his mind. Finally, he nodded once. Yeah, I guess that's all right. Ma wouldn't want all her recipes just sitting there gathering dust. It was the first thing approaching approval James had offered, and Eliza accepted it for the gift it was. After dinner, the children scattered to their evening routines, James to help his father with final chores, Matthew to wherever he went to be alone with his anger, the younger ones to play in the fading light. Eliza cleaned up the kitchen, her hands moving through the familiar rhythm of washing and drying and putting away. She was elbow-deep in soapy water when Levi appeared at her side, so quiet she hadn't heard him approach. He held out a tin cup with both hands, offering it like a sacred object. Eliza dried her hands and took the cup, examining it. It was dented, clearly well used with no particular distinction except for the fact that a small flower had been scratched into the metal. Amateur work, probably done with a nail. "Did you want me to wash this?" she asked gently. Levi shook his head. Then, in a voice so soft she had to strain to hear it, "For you, Mama's cup. She'd want you to have it." The words, coming from this silent child who hadn't said more than a dozen words since his mother's funeral, hit Eliza like a thunderclap. She knelt down, bringing herself to Levi's eye level, the cup cradled in her palms. "Levi, this is precious. Are you sure?" He nodded, his eyes enormous and solemn. Then, even softer, "You're nice to Mira. Mama would like that." Before Eliza could respond, before she could even process what this gesture meant, Levi had turned and fled, disappearing into the gathering dusk with the speed of a startled deer. Eliza stayed kneeling there for a long moment, this battered tin cup in her hands, tears she hadn't planned on crying sliding down her cheeks. She'd spent the last year being told she was worthless, being measured against an impossible standard and found wanting at every turn. And now this quiet little boy, who barely spoke to anyone, had given her his mother's cup and called her nice. It was such a small thing, such an impossibly small thing, but it felt like being handed a piece of the sun. "Miss Moreland?" Beau's voice from the doorway made her start. She stood quickly, swiping at her wet cheeks with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was just... Levi gave me this cup and I..." "Catherine's cup," Beau said quietly, stepping fully into the kitchen. She drank her morning coffee from it every day, claimed it kept the coffee hotter than any other cup in the house, though I think it was just because it was her favorite. "He said she'd want me to have it, because I was nice to Mira." Eliza's voice cracked despite her best efforts. "I don't think anyone's called me nice in a very long time, Mr. Thatcher." Beau moved closer, his boots soft on the clean floor, and gently took the cup from her trembling hands. He turned it over, finding the scratched flower, his thumb tracing it with obvious familiarity. "I did that," he admitted. "Scratched that flower on there for her first Mother's Day after James was born. Wanted to give her something special, but we didn't have much money. So I took a nail and spent an evening scratching this sorry excuse for a daisy into the tin. She cried when I gave it to her, told me it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen." He handed the cup back to Eliza, his winter sky eyes holding hers. "Levi hasn't spoken more than a handful of words since the funeral. The doctor said it's grief, that he'll talk again when he's ready. But he talked to you today. Gave you something precious. That means something, Miss Moreland. That means you're doing exactly what I hoped you'd do." "I'm just trying to help," Eliza whispered. "I don't know if I'm doing it right. I burned the first pot of coffee this morning, and I'm pretty sure Matthew hates me, and James barely tolerates my existence, and I keep feeling like I'm walking through someone else's life, someone else's home." "You are," Beau interrupted gently. "You're walking through Catherine's life, trying to keep it going when she can't. That's an impossible task, Miss Moreland. No one expects you to be her, but maybe you can be yourself here. Maybe that's enough." Eliza looked down at the cup in her hands, at the scratched flower that represented a young father's love for his wife, now entrusted to a stranger's care. "I hope so," she said. "I hope I'm enough for them. For all of you." Beau didn't respond to that, just stood there in the fading light of the kitchen, close enough that Eliza could smell the day's work on him, dust and sweat and honest labor. For a long moment, they simply existed in the same space, two broken people trying to hold together a household fractured by loss. Then Beau stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should check on the boys, make sure they're settled for the night. Thank you for dinner, Miss Moreland, and for everything else today." "Eliza," she said impulsively. "You can call me Eliza. Miss Moreland makes me feel like a schoolteacher." The corner of Beau's mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. "Eliza, then. Good night." "Good night, Mr. Thatcher." "Beau," he countered. "Fair's fair." "Good night, Beau." After he left, Eliza finished cleaning up, then climbed the stairs to her small room. She placed Catherine's cup on the dresser, positioned so it would be the first thing she saw in the morning. A reminder that she had a place here, however tentative. A reminder that even silent children could offer grace when you least expected it. She changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed, pulling out her mother's locket again. But tonight, instead of feeling only pain when she looked at the tiny portrait, she felt something else threading through the grief. purpose, maybe. Or belonging. Or just the simple relief of having made it through one full day without completely falling apart. Outside her window, the desert night sang its ancient song, and in the house below, 5 children and 1 grieving father settled into sleep. Their home a little cleaner, their bellies a little fuller, their grief a little less suffocating than it had been the day before. It wasn't much, but it was something. And sometimes, Eliza was learning, something was enough. The days that followed settled into an uneasy rhythm, like a song played in an unfamiliar key. Eliza rose with the rooster each morning, her body slowly adjusting to the demands of ranch life. The early hours, the endless work, the New Mexico heat that turned the kitchen into an oven by midday. She cooked and cleaned and mended, her hands finding their way through Catherine Thatcher's routines, trying to honor what had been while carving out space for what could be. The children remained a complicated puzzle. Mira had attached herself to Eliza with the intensity of a 5-year-old who'd been starving for maternal attention, following her from room to room, chattering endlessly about her mother and her dreams, and the elaborate stories she invented for her rag doll. Nathaniel was easier, his sunny disposition making him quick to accept anyone who showed him kindness and didn't yell. He'd taken to helping Eliza with small tasks, his gap-toothed grin appearing whenever she praised his efforts. Levi remained silent, but he was present in ways that mattered, appearing at her elbow when she needed something moved, leaving small gifts like wildflowers or interesting rocks on her windowsill, his enormous eyes tracking her movements with an intensity that was both unnerving and oddly comforting. James had progressed from outright hostility to wary tolerance, though he still watched her like a hawk, ready to pounce if she made one wrong move. And Matthew remained stubbornly, determinedly angry, his 9-year-old rage a wall she couldn't seem to breach, no matter how gentle her approach. 3 weeks into her tenure at the Thatcher Ranch, everything changed. It started innocently enough. Mira woke up fussy, complaining that her throat hurt and her head felt funny. Eliza felt the little girl's forehead, warm but not alarming, probably just a summer cold, nothing that rest in fluids wouldn't cure. "You're staying in bed today, sweetheart," Eliza said, tucking the covers around Mira's small body. "I'll bring you some tea with honey, and you can rest while your brothers do their chores." "But I wanted to help you make bread," Mira protested weakly, her voice already taking on that raspy quality that came with illness. "The bread will wait. You can't help me if you're sick." Eliza smoothed the damp hair back from Mira's forehead. "Close your eyes now. I'll check on you in a little while." By noon, Mira's condition had worsened. The mild fever had spiked into something more serious, her small body burning hot to the touch despite the cool cloths Eliza kept applying. The little girl drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling nonsense about her mother and the chickens and whether the sky was supposed to be that color. "I need to get your father," Eliza told James, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "Can you ride out to the north pasture where he's working?" James's face had gone pale, his earlier swagger replaced by raw fear. Is it like when Ma—" "No," Eliza said firmly, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. "It's not like that. But she needs her father, and she needs the doctor. Can you fetch your father while I send Matthew to town for Doc Morrison?" James nodded mutely and bolted for the door, running toward the barn with the desperate speed of a child trying to outrun his worst nightmare. Matthew, when told he needed to ride to town, just stared at her with those angry eyes. "Why should I do what you say?" "Because your sister is very sick," Eliza said, her patience finally cracking under the weight of fear and exhaustion. "Because I can't leave her to ride for the doctor myself. Because, despite the fact that you've spent 3 weeks treating me like I'm your enemy, I know you love Mira. So please, Matthew, please ride to town and bring back Doc Morrison." Something in her voice, the desperation maybe, or the fact that she'd finally acknowledged his hostility directly, got through to him. Without another word, he ran for the barn, and minutes later, Eliza heard the thunder of hoofbeats as he raced toward Ash Ridge. That left her alone with Mira, Levi, and Nathaniel. The twins had understood enough to know something was very wrong, their usual energy subdued into worried stillness. "Levi," Eliza said, "I need you to pump fresh water and bring it up here, as much as you can carry. Nathaniel, go to the root cellar and bring me any herbs you can find. Dried mint, chamomile, anything that looks like it might be for tea. The boys scattered to their tasks, leaving Eliza alone with the feverish child. Mira's breathing had turned ragged, each breath a labored effort. Her skin was dry and burning, her lips cracked despite Eliza's attempts to get her to drink. "Please," Eliza whispered, pressing another cool cloth to Mira's forehead. "Please don't take this child. She's already lost her mother. Don't make her brothers lose her too." She didn't know who she was praying to. She'd never been particularly religious, her faith tested and found wanting during the long, barren years of her marriage. But in this moment, with this little girl burning up in her arms, she would beg anyone, anything, for help. Levi returned with water, his eyes huge and frightened. Nathaniel brought an armful of dried herbs, some of which Eliza recognized, and some she didn't. She made a tea from chamomile and mint, sweetening it with honey, and tried to coax Mira into drinking. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured, supporting Mira's head while holding the cup to her cracked lips. "Just a few sips. That's all I need. Just a few sips." Mira managed 2 swallows before turning her head away, whimpering. Time became elastic, stretching and compressing in ways that defied logic. Minutes felt like hours. The sun crawled across the sky with agonizing slowness. Eliza kept working, cool cloths, fresh water, attempts to get liquids into Mira's body. Levi and Nathaniel hovered nearby, too frightened to leave but too helpless to do anything useful. When Bo finally burst through the door, his face was a mask of controlled terror. Behind him came James, and behind James came Matthew, with Doc Morrison, a grizzled man in his 60s who'd seen every kind of illness the territory had to offer. "Out," Doc Morrison said, shooing everyone but Eliza from the room. "All of you out. Let me examine the child." The next 20 minutes were excruciating. Doc Morrison poked and prodded, listened to Mira's labored breathing, checked her pupils and her pulse, and a dozen other things Eliza didn't understand. His face remained professionally neutral, giving nothing away. Finally, he straightened and turned to Eliza. "How long has she been like this?" "Since this morning. She woke up with a sore throat and a mild fever. By noon, it had gotten much worse." "Have you been keeping her cool, giving her fluids?" "As much as I could get her to take. She's barely conscious most of the time." Doc Morrison nodded slowly, then pulled a small vial from his bag. "This is willow bark extract. Dissolve 2 drops in water and get her to drink it. It'll help bring the fever down. Keep doing what you've been doing. Cool cloths, fluids, rest. And don't let anyone else in this room unless they've already had scarlet fever." "Scarlet fever?" Eliza's blood ran cold. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure. The rash will confirm it in the next day or so, but all the signs are there." He fixed her with a stern look. "This is serious, miss. This fever could kill her if it gets any higher. You need to stay with her, keep her cool, get fluids in her any way you can. Can you do that?" "Yes," Eliza said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I can do that." "Good. I'll be back tomorrow to check on her. In the meantime, keep everyone else away. Scarlet fever spreads like wildfire, and the last thing this family needs is all 5 children sick at once." He left the vial on the bedside table and headed downstairs to give Bo the same grim news. Eliza could hear the murmur of voices, the sharp intake of breath when Bo learned what his daughter was facing, the doctor's measured reassurances that meant nothing in the face of actual fear. When Bo appeared in the doorway, his face was gray. "Doc says you're to stay with her, that you're doing everything right." "I'll take care of her," Eliza promised. "I won't leave her side." "The boys will be fine. They can manage for a few days. James knows how to cook basic meals, and Levi and Nathaniel can handle the chickens and the smaller chores. You focus on the ranch, and I'll focus on Mira." Bo looked at his daughter, so small and fragile in the bed, and something broke in his expression. "I can't lose her too," he said hoarsely. "I can't. It'll kill me." "You won't lose her," Eliza said with more confidence than she possessed. "I won't let you lose her." He left then, because there was nothing else he could do, and Eliza settled in for the longest night of her life. She pulled a chair close to the bed and kept vigil, changing the cool cloths every few minutes, dripping water and willow bark extract onto Mira's cracked lips, monitoring every breath and whimper. Levi brought her food she didn't eat. Nathaniel brought fresh water without being asked. James appeared in the doorway every hour, his face haggard with worry, needing to see that his sister was still breathing. Even Matthew came, standing in the hallway outside the room, not entering but not leaving either. When Eliza caught his eye, she saw past the anger for the first time. Saw the terrified little boy underneath, the child who'd already lost one person he loved and couldn't bear to lose another. "She's going to be all right," Eliza told him softly. "I promise you, Matthew. I'm going to make sure she's all right." "You can't promise that," Matthew said, his voice cracking. "Nobody can promise that. Ma died even though everyone said she'd get better. You can't promise anything." "You're right," Eliza admitted. "I can't know for certain what's going to happen, but I can promise that I'll do everything in my power to help her. I won't sleep, I won't rest, I won't stop fighting for her. That much I can promise." Matthew stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once and disappeared back down the hallway, his footsteps heavy with the weight of remembered grief. The night deepened. Mira's fever raged. Eliza worked through exhaustion, through the ache in her back from bending over the bed, through the scratchy dryness of her own eyes. She sang every lullaby she could remember from her childhood, her voice rough but persistent. She told stories about brave little girls who fought dragons and won. She prayed in whispered fragments, bargaining with a god she wasn't sure was listening. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, Mira's fever spiked higher. The little girl began thrashing, her small body convulsing with the heat, her skin so hot it hurt to touch. Eliza's calm cracked. "No, no, no," she whispered frantically, stripping away the blankets, pressing cool cloths everywhere she could reach. "Come on, sweetheart, come back to me. Come back." She worked with desperate efficiency, changing the water to make it colder, adding more willow bark extract, physically holding Mira still so she wouldn't hurt herself in her delirium. Tears streamed down her face, unchecked as she worked, her hands moving on instinct while her mind screamed prayers and pleas into the darkness. "You can't have her," Eliza said fiercely to the empty room, to whatever force decided who lived and who died. "I don't care what you took from me. I don't care that my body couldn't give life. I'm giving it now. I'm choosing this child, this life, this moment, and you can't have her." Time lost all meaning. There was only Mira's burning skin and Eliza's cool cloths, only the ragged breathing and the whispered prayers, only the endless battle between fever and will. And then, just as the first gray light of dawn began seeping through the window, something shifted. Mira's thrashing slowed. Her breathing, while still labored, became more regular. Eliza pressed her palm to the child's forehead and felt not coolness, not yet, but less heat. The fever was breaking. "That's it," Eliza whispered, exhausted tears falling faster now. "That's my girl. Come back to us. Come on back." As the sun rose over the New Mexico desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Mira's eyes fluttered open. They were glassy and unfocused, but they were open. Her cracked lips moved, forming words that came out as barely audible whispers. "Thirsty." It was the most beautiful word Eliza had ever heard. "Yes, sweetheart, yes, I'll get you water." Eliza's hand shook as she poured fresh water, adding a drop of honey for sweetness. She supported Mira's head with infinite gentleness and helped her drink. The little girl managed 3 sips before turning her head away with a soft whimper. But it was enough. It was progress. It was life choosing to stay instead of slip away. "More later," Eliza promised, setting the cup aside. "Rest now. You're going to be all right." "Mama?" Mira's voice was confused, her eyes struggling to focus. Eliza's heart clenched. "No, sweetheart. It's Miss Eliza. Your mama's still with God, remember? But I'm here. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere." Mira's face crumpled, fresh tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. "Want Mama?" I know you do." Eliza smoothed the damp hair back from Mira's forehead, her own tears falling freely now. "But your mama can't come back, baby, so you've got me instead. I know I'm not her. I know I'm not what you want. But I'm here, and I love you, and I'm so very glad you decided to stay with us." She hadn't meant to say it, that she loved this child. It had slipped out in her exhaustion, a truth she hadn't even acknowledged to herself. But once spoken, she couldn't take it back, didn't want to take it back. Mira's eyes drifted closed again, but her small hand found Eliza's and held on with surprising strength. "Stay?" "Always," Eliza promised. "I'll stay always." She must have dozed then, exhaustion finally claiming her. Because the next thing she knew, someone was touching her shoulder gently, and she jerked awake with a gasp, her hand instinctively going to Mira to check that the child was still breathing. Bo stood beside her, his face showing every hour of a sleepless night. "Doc Morrison's here," he said quietly. "Came at first light like he promised. How is she?" "Fever broke about an hour ago," Eliza said, her voice hoarse from disuse and emotion. She woke up, asked for water, managed a few sips. I think she's going to be all right." Something that might have been a sob caught in Bo's throat, but he swallowed it back. "You stayed all night. I told you I would. James said you barely ate, that you've been up here for almost 24 hours straight. Your daughter needed me," Eliza said simply. That mattered more than sleep or food. Doc Morrison appeared in the doorway then, his medical bag in hand. He examined Mira with efficient movements, his grizzled face betraying nothing until he'd completed his assessment. Finally, he straightened and turned to them with the first hint of a smile Eliza had seen on his craggy features. "She'll live," he pronounced. "Fever's broken, which is the biggest hurdle. She'll need rest for the next week or so, light foods, plenty of fluids. Keep her in bed even after she starts feeling better. Scarlet fever is tricky, and you don't want to relapse. But barring complications, she'll make a full recovery." Bo's knees seemed to buckle slightly, and he reached out to steady himself against the door frame. "Thank God," he whispered. "Thank God." "Thank Miss Moreland here," Doc Morrison said, packing up his instruments. "Most folks wouldn't have known what to do, or wouldn't have had the stamina to do it for so long. She saved your daughter's life, Mr. Thatcher. No question about it." He left them with instructions and another vial of willow bark extract, warning them to watch for the telltale rash that would confirm his scarlet fever diagnosis. After he'd gone, Bo and Eliza stood on either side of Mira's bed, watching the little girl sleep peacefully for the first time in 24 hours. "I don't know how to thank you," Bo said finally, his voice thick with emotion he was trying hard to control. "There aren't words big enough for what you did." "I didn't do anything special," Eliza protested. I stayed, that's all." "That's everything," Bo corrected. He turned to look at her fully, and Eliza became suddenly aware of how she must look, hair falling out of its braid, dress rumpled and stained with sweat and water, dark circles under her eyes from exhaustion. "You could have left this to the boys and me. You could have kept your distance, protected yourself from getting sick too. But you didn't. You stayed with her all night, fought for her like she was your own." "She is mine," Eliza said, the truth of it settling into her bones as she spoke. "Maybe not by blood, but by choice. I chose her, Bo. I chose all of them. And when you choose someone, you fight for them. You don't leave them to face the darkness alone." Bo's winter sky eyes held hers for a long moment, something shifting in them that Eliza couldn't quite name. "You should rest," he said finally. "I'll sit with her for a while. You've earned sleep in a real bed." Eliza wanted to argue, wanted to insist she needed to stay, but her body betrayed her with a massive yawn. "Just a few hours," she conceded. "Wake me if she needs anything." "I will." Eliza stumbled to her room and fell onto the bed still fully clothed, asleep before her head properly hit the pillow. She dreamed of fever and darkness and a little girl's hand holding hers with desperate strength. When she woke, the sun was high, and the house was filled with the smell of cooking food. She rose groggily, splashed water on her face, and made her way downstairs to find the kitchen full of activity. James stood at the stove, attempting something that might have been soup. Nathaniel was setting the table with exaggerated care, his tongue poking out between his teeth in concentration. Levi was sweeping the floor with methodical precision, and Matthew was peeling potatoes at the table, his movements angry but efficient. They all looked up when she appeared, and for a moment no one spoke. Then Nathaniel ran to her, throwing his arms around her waist with enough force to nearly knock her over. "You saved Mira," he declared. "Doc Morrison said you saved her life." "We all helped," Eliza said, steadying herself. "You boys kept the house running while I was upstairs. That mattered too." "But you stayed with her all night," James said, not turning from his soup. "You didn't sleep. You didn't eat. You just stayed." There was something different in his voice now, The hostility had burned away, leaving something raw and honest underneath. Respect, maybe. Or the beginnings of trust. Of course I stayed, Eliza said. She needed someone. Ma would have stayed too, James said quietly. Ma would have done exactly what you did. It was the highest compliment he could have given her, and they both knew it. Eliza's throat tightened with emotion. Thank you, James. That means more than you know. Even Matthew looked up from his potatoes then, his angry mask slipping just enough to show the confused, hurting boy underneath. You really meant it, he said, his voice uncertain. When you said you'd fight for her, you really meant it. Yes, Eliza said simply. I meant it. And I mean it about all of you. You're my children now, whether you like it or not. I'll fight for every single one of you. Matthew's hand stilled on the potato he'd been peeling. For a long moment, he just stared at her, working through something complex in his 9-year-old mind. Then, so quietly, she almost missed it. Thank you. It was the first kind thing he'd said to her in 3 weeks. Eliza felt tears prick at her eyes again. Apparently exhaustion had left her defenses weak, but she blinked them back. You're welcome, Matthew. Now, who's hungry? Because I smell something burning. James yelped and spun back to his soup, which had indeed begun to scorch on the bottom. The moment of emotional intensity broke into organized chaos as everyone scrambled to save lunch. But something had shifted. Some invisible line had been crossed, and they all felt it. Over the next week, as Mira slowly recovered her strength, the household found a new rhythm. James stopped watching Eliza with suspicion and started actually asking her questions about cooking, about his mother's recipes, about whether she thought a certain shirt was clean enough or needed rewashing. Nathaniel appointed himself her shadow, following her everywhere and narrating her activities like she was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. Levi's gifts increased. More flowers, more interesting rocks, and once a perfectly symmetrical bird's feather that he placed on her pillow with the reverence of someone offering treasure. And Matthew slowly, gradually let his walls come down. It started with small things, passing her the salt at dinner without being asked, offering to carry water from the pump, not scowling quite so fiercely when she asked him to do chores. By the end of the week, he'd actually smiled at something she said, a quick flash of expression that he'd tried to hide but hadn't quite managed. On the 8th day after Mira's fever broke, the little girl was finally well enough to come downstairs for dinner. She was thinner, paler, and still weak enough that Bo had to carry her, but her eyes were bright and her smile was genuine. They gathered around the table, all 7 of them, for the first meal they'd shared since Mira had gotten sick. Eliza had made chicken and dumplings from Catherine's recipe box, and fresh bread that had actually risen properly this time, and apple pie from the last of the cold cellar stores. As they ate, conversation flowed naturally. The boys talking about their chores, Mira chattering about all the things she'd missed while sick, Bo quietly listening to his children with an expression of profound relief. Eliza watched them all, these people who'd become hers through circumstance and choice, and felt something loosen in her chest. This was what family felt like, she realized. Not blood, not biology, just people who showed up for each other, who fought for each other, who chose to stay even when staying was hard. Miss Eliza? Mira's small voice cut through the conversation. Can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. When I was really sick and I woke up for a little bit, you said you loved me. Did you mean it? The table went quiet. All eyes turned to Eliza, waiting for her answer. She could feel Bo's gaze particularly, though she didn't dare look at him. Yes, Eliza said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to swamp her. I meant it. I love you, Mira. I love all of you. Even me? Matthew asked, his voice small. Even though I was mean to you? Even you, Eliza confirmed. Especially you, Matthew, because I understand why you were angry, and I'm not going anywhere, no matter how much you push. Nathaniel beamed at her. I love you too, Miss Eliza. Levi, silent as always, simply reached across the table and squeezed her hand once before returning to his dinner, but the message was clear. James cleared his throat, his face flushing slightly. We wanted to tell you something, all of us. We talked about it while you were taking care of Mira. Oh? Eliza's heart started beating faster. Yeah. James glanced at his siblings, gathering courage. We know you're not our ma. You're not trying to be our ma, and we appreciate that. But you're here, and you care, and you fight for us. So we thought, we wanted to know if, can we call you Mama? Mira blurted out, unable to wait for James to finish his carefully prepared speech. Not instead of our first mama, but like a second mama? The mama who's here now? Eliza couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The question hung in the air like something holy, like an offering she didn't deserve but desperately wanted to accept. You don't have to, James added quickly, misreading her silence. We know it's a big thing to ask. We just thought, yes, Eliza managed, her voice breaking. Yes, you can call me Mama. I'd be honored. The smile that broke across Mira's face was brighter than the New Mexico sun. Really? Really? Then can you tuck me in tonight, like a real mama would? Of course, baby girl. Of course I will. Dinner continued with lighter hearts and fuller laughter. After the meal, after the dishes were washed and put away, after the children had scattered to their evening activities, Eliza found herself alone on the back porch, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. Bo joined her there, 2 tin cups in his hands. He offered one to her, Catherine's cup, with its scratched flower, filled with coffee that was actually drinkable this time. Thank you, Eliza said, accepting it gratefully. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their coffee, watching the sky turn from blue to gold to deep purple. Finally, Bo spoke. They mean it, about calling you Mama. It's not just gratitude talking, or relief that Mira's alive. They've chosen you. All of them, even Matthew. I know, Eliza said softly. I can feel it. And Bo, I need you to know that I take that seriously. I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to let them down. Whatever happens, however long you need me here, I'll stay. Even though this isn't the life you probably imagined for yourself, Bo asked, even though you're caring for another woman's children in another woman's house? This is better than any life I imagined, Eliza said honestly. In my old life, I was broken, defective, worth $1 silver in a public square. Here, I'm needed. I matter. I get to love children who love me back, who chose me not because I could give them life, but because I chose to stay when staying was hard. That's more than I ever thought I'd have. Bo turned to look at her fully, his winter sky eyes reflecting the last of the sunset. You're not defective, Eliza. You never were. Anyone who told you that was a fool. My body can't. Your body isn't what makes you valuable, Bo interrupted gently. Your heart is. Your courage is. The fact that you stayed awake for 24 hours straight fighting for a child who wasn't even yours by blood, that's what makes you valuable. Catherine would have... His voice caught, and he had to pause to collect himself. Catherine would have loved you, would have called you sister, would have been grateful beyond words that her children found you when they needed someone most. Eliza's tears fell freely now, running down her cheeks unchecked. I wish I could have known her. She's here, Bo said, gesturing to the house behind them. In her recipes, in her children, in the way this home was built with love. You're not erasing her, Eliza. You're honoring her, keeping her alive through the life you're giving her children. Thank you, Eliza whispered, for bringing me here, for giving me this chance, for not judging me. Thank you, Bo countered, for staying, for fighting, for loving them, even when they made it hard. They finished their coffee as the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear, countless and bright in the clear desert air. And when they finally went inside, when Eliza climbed the stairs to tuck 5 children into bed for the first time as Mama, her heart was fuller than it had ever been. She saved Mira's room for last, the little girl already drowsy but fighting sleep to wait for her promised tucking in. Mama? Mira said as Eliza pulled the covers up around her shoulders. Will you tell me about when you were little? What do you want to know? Everything. I want to know everything about you. So Eliza settled on the edge of the bed and began to tell stories about her own childhood, about her grandmother who'd taught her to braid hair, about the time she'd tried to bake a cake and accidentally used salt instead of sugar. She talked until Mira's eyes drifted closed, until the little girl's breathing evened out into the rhythm of healthy sleep. Good night, baby girl, Eliza whispered, pressing a kiss to Mira's forehead. Sweet dreams. Love you, Mama, Mira mumbled, already more asleep than awake. Love you too, sweetheart. So very much. As Eliza closed the door softly behind her, she found all 4 boys waiting in the hallway, lined up like they'd been rehearsing this moment. "Good night, Mama," they chorused, their voices ranging from James's newly deepening tone to Nathaniel's child treble. "Good night, my boys," Eliza said, her voice thick with emotion. "Sleep well." She made her way to her own room finally, exhausted but content in ways she'd never experienced before. As she changed into her nightgown and settled into bed, she pulled out her mother's locket one last time, looking at the picture of the young, hopeful woman who'd given birth to her. "I found it, Mama," she whispered to the image. "I found where I belong. Not where I was born and not where I was sold, but here, with these children who chose me, with this man who saw value in me when no one else did. I'm not broken anymore. Or maybe I am, but it doesn't matter here. Here, broken is just another word for human." She closed the locket and set it on the bedside table next to Catherine's cup with its scratched flower. 2 women's legacies side by side, both honored, both cherished. Outside, the desert sang its nightly song. Inside, a house full of healing hearts settled into peaceful sleep. And in the small room at the top of the stairs, Eliza Moreland, no longer Pemberton, but simply Mama, closed her eyes and dreamed of tomorrow. Summer deepened into the kind of heat that made the air shimmer and dance, turning the New Mexico landscape into something that existed between earth and mirage. The ranch work intensified with the season. Cattle needed moving to higher pastures, fences required constant mending, and the garden demanded daily attention just to survive the relentless sun. But inside the Thatcher house, something had bloomed that had nothing to do with the struggling vegetables or the resilient desert flowers. The children had truly claimed Eliza as their own, and she'd claimed them right back with a fierceness that surprised even herself. Mornings began with Mira crawling into her bed at dawn, snuggling close and whispering elaborate plans for the day. Nathaniel shadowed her through chores, his gap-toothed grin constant and his chatter endless. Levi spoke more now, not frequently, but in careful words that carried weight precisely because he used them so sparingly. James had become her right hand, anticipating needs before she voiced them, teaching her the rhythms of ranch life that his mother had known by heart. And Matthew had transformed from her fiercest opponent into her most devoted defender, quick to jump to her aid and quicker still to correct anyone who didn't show her proper respect. It was Matthew's devotion, actually, that led to the incident in town. 6 weeks after Mira's recovery, they needed supplies from Ash Ridge that couldn't wait for the monthly supply run. Flour and sugar had run dangerously low, and Doc Morrison had sent word that he had medicine for Eliza to pick up, a tonic he'd ordered special for building Mira's strength after her illness. "I'll go," Bo had said at breakfast, but Eliza shook her head. "You've got that fence line in the north pasture that can't wait. James told me about it last night. Said if it's not fixed today, you'll lose cattle to the ravine." She wiped her hands on her apron, decision made. "I'll take the wagon to town. Matthew and Nathaniel can come with me for an extra set of hands." Bo had looked uncertain, his coffee cup pausing halfway to his lips. "Are you sure? The folks in Ash Ridge, they weren't exactly kind to you when you left." "Then they can practice being kind now," Eliza said with more confidence than she felt. "I'm not the woman they sold 6 weeks ago, Bo. I'm different now. I have a home, I have children, I have a place where I belong. They can't take that from me." Something flickered in Bo's eyes at that, pride maybe, or approval. "Take James too then, just in case there's trouble." So the 4 of them had set out after breakfast, the wagon rattling along the familiar road toward Ash Ridge. Eliza hadn't been back since the day of her sale, and as the town came into view, small and dusty and full of memories she'd rather forget, her resolve wavered slightly. "Mama?" Nathaniel, sitting beside her on the bench seat, touched her arm. "You're squeezing the reins real tight. Are your hands okay?" Eliza loosened her grip, realizing she'd been strangling the leather. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking." "About when Grandpa sold you?" Matthew asked from the back of the wagon, his voice carrying that edge of protective anger he got whenever anyone mentioned her past. "Because if anyone says anything mean to you, You'll mind your manners and be polite," Eliza interrupted firmly. We're here for supplies, not confrontation. We get what we need and go home. Understood? Yes, Mama, Matthew muttered, though his scowl suggested he was mentally cataloging potential insults and preparing responses. They pulled up in front of Henderson's General Store, the same building where Bo had loaded supplies the day he'd bought her. Eliza climbed down from the wagon with as much dignity as she could muster, smoothing her dress and straightening her bonnet. She'd worn her church dress today, not the faded everyday calico, but the nicer blue cotton that Catherine's skilled hands had sewn years ago, and that Eliza had carefully let out to fit her own frame. The bell above the door chimed as they entered, and Mrs. Henderson looked up from her counter. The woman's eyes widened in recognition, her mouth forming a small O of surprise. Mrs. She faltered, clearly unsure how to address the woman who'd been sold like property 6 weeks ago. Mrs. Thatcher, James supplied, his young voice carrying unexpected authority. This is our mother now. We need flour, sugar, salt, and whatever else is on this list. He handed over a paper covered in Eliza's careful handwriting. Mrs. Henderson took the list with trembling fingers, her eyes darting between Eliza and the children. Of course, right away. I'll get these things together for you. She scurried into the back room, leaving them alone in the store. Eliza could feel eyes on her from the street, curious townspeople peering through the windows, no doubt already spreading word that the barren woman had returned. Let them stare, Matthew said fiercely, moving closer to Eliza's side. They're just jealous because you're ours now and they don't have anyone half as good. Eliza's heart squeezed at the fierce loyalty in his voice. She rested her hand on his shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. Thank you, my love, but remember we don't need their approval. We have each other. Mrs. Henderson returned with their supplies, packing them with nervous efficiency. As she tallied the cost, the bell chimed again, and Eliza's stomach dropped. Harold Pemberton's mother swept into the store like a ship under full sail, all rustling black silk and righteous indignation. She'd been in mourning since Harold's death, and apparently planned to wear her grief like armor indefinitely. Margaret, she addressed Mrs. Henderson without looking at Eliza. I need black thread and... She stopped mid-sentence as her eyes landed on Eliza. You. The word was packed with enough venom to kill a rattlesnake. Eliza kept her expression neutral, her hands folded calmly in front of her. Mrs. Pemberton, I hope you're well. Well? The older woman's face flushed an alarming shade of purple. Well, you have the audacity to ask about my well-being when you're standing there dressed like you have some claim to respectability? When everyone knows what you are? That barren ghost who killed my son with her deficiency? Your son died in a riding accident, Eliza said quietly, feeling all 3 boys tense beside her. I'm sorry for your loss, truly I am, but his death wasn't my fault any more than my inability to conceive was. Inability? Mrs. Pemberton's voice rose to a screech. You're cursed, that's what you are. Cursed and useless, and don't you dare talk to our mama that way. Matthew stepped forward, his 9-year-old frame vibrating with rage. She's not cursed. She's the best mama in the whole territory, and she takes better care of us than you probably ever took care of anybody. Matthew, Eliza said warningly, but Mrs. Pemberton was already advancing on the boy like an avenging angel. How dare you speak to me that way, you impudent child? Someone should teach you proper respect for your elders. She reached out as if to grab Matthew's ear, but James was suddenly there, inserting himself between the angry woman and his younger brother. At 12, he was nearly as tall as Mrs. Pemberton, and he used every inch of that height now. Don't touch my brother, he said, his voice low and dangerous in a way that reminded Eliza startlingly of Bo. And don't insult our mother. She's worth 10 of anyone in this town, including you. Why, I never... Mrs. Pemberton sputtered. Margaret, are you hearing this? These wild children need discipline. And as for their so-called mother, she's our real mother, Nathaniel piped up, not to be left out. She stayed up all night when Mira was sick and saved her life. What have you ever done that was that brave? Mrs. Henderson, caught in the middle of this confrontation, looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Perhaps we should all just... I'll tell you what I've done, Mrs. Pemberton cut her off. I've maintained my dignity. I've upheld proper standards. I haven't sold myself to the first man who'd have me for the price of a drink." The slap of those words hung in the air. Eliza felt her carefully maintained composure crack slightly, felt the old shame trying to worm its way back into her heart. But before she could respond, before she could defend herself, all three boys were talking at once. "Pa paid $1 because that's all she was worth to this terrible town. He saved her from you awful people. She's the best thing that ever happened to us." "Boys," Eliza said, her voice cutting through their passionate defense, "that's enough. Thank you for standing up for me, but I can fight my own battles." She turned to face Mrs. Pemberton fully, drawing herself up to her full height. "You're right about one thing. Bo Thatcher bought me for $1 in a public square. Do you know why he only paid $1? Mrs. Pemberton's mouth worked soundlessly. "Because no one else bid," Eliza continued, her voice steady and clear. "Because every person in this town had already decided I was worthless based on something I couldn't control. But Bo Thatcher, he saw something different. He saw someone who could love his children, who could keep his home, who could show up every single day and do the work that matters. And I have. Every day for 6 weeks, I've proven that my worth has nothing to do with my womb and everything to do with my heart." She took a step closer to Mrs. Pemberton, and the older woman actually backed up slightly. "So you can call me cursed, you can call me barren, you can call me whatever you want, but those boys standing behind me, they call me Mama, and their sister who's home resting because I fought through a night of fever to save her life. She calls me Mama, too. Their father, who works himself to exhaustion every day to provide for his family, he calls me the best decision he ever made." Eliza's voice dropped lower, more intense. "So I'll ask you, Mrs. Pemberton, what do people call you? Because from where I'm standing, all I see is a bitter woman wearing her grief like a badge of honor, using it as an excuse to tear down anyone who's found a way to be happy despite their losses." The silence that followed was absolute. Mrs. Henderson stood frozen behind her counter. The boys stared at Eliza with expressions of awe and pride. And Mrs. Pemberton looked like she'd been slapped. "How dare you?" she finally whispered. "How dare you speak to me that way?" "I dare because I'm not afraid of you anymore," Eliza said simply. "I'm not afraid of this town anymore. You already did your worst to me, and I survived. I more than survived. I found a family who loves me. What more can you possibly take from me?" Mrs. Pemberton turned on her heel and stormed from the store, the bell chiming violently with her exit. In the aftermath, Eliza's hands started to shake, the adrenaline of confrontation finally catching up with her. "Mama, that was amazing," Nathaniel breathed. "You were like a hero in a story." "You made her run away," Matthew added with deep satisfaction. "She couldn't even think of anything to say back." James just looked at her with new respect in his eyes. "Pa was right," he said quietly. "You are the best decision he ever made." Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat nervously. "Your total comes to $3.47, Mrs. Thatcher, and I want you to know what you said was right. We were all wrong about you. I'm sorry for that." Eliza counted out the money with still trembling hands. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. That means more than you know." They loaded their supplies into the wagon and headed for Doc Morrison's office next. The doctor was waiting for them, a bottle of dark liquid in his hands. "Tonic for young Mira," he said, handing it to Eliza. "1 spoonful with breakfast every day for the next month. Should help rebuild her strength after that scarlet fever." "Thank you, doctor." Eliza tucked the bottle carefully into her bag. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing," Doc Morrison said. "Consider it payment for the excellent nursing you provided. Not many folks could have brought that child through what you did. You've got a gift, Mrs. Thatcher." "It's just Eliza, please. Or Mama, if you ask the children." She smiled at that, still getting used to the title. "Mama suits you," the doctor said with a rare smile of his own. "Now get those boys home before they cause any more scenes. I already heard about the confrontation at Henderson's. News travels fast in a small town." Of course it did. Eliza ushered the boys back to the wagon, eager to be away from Ash Ridge and back to the safety of the ranch. But as they passed the town square, that cursed square where she'd stood on a platform 6 weeks ago, someone called her name. "Eliza! Eliza, wait!" She turned to see her brother Thomas running toward them, his 16-year-old frame all awkward angles and earnest desperation. She hadn't seen him since the day of her sale, and the sight of him now brought a complicated rush of emotions. "Thomas," she said, pulling the wagon to a stop. Her brother skidded to a halt beside them, breathing hard. "I heard you were in town. I've been hoping. I wanted to see you, to apologize." "For what?" "For not stopping Pa. For not standing up for you when he sold you like—" Thomas's voice cracked. "I should have done something. I should have protected you." Eliza climbed down from the wagon, leaving the boys watching with intense curiosity. She approached her little brother, not so little anymore, and saw the guilt eating him alive. "Thomas, you were 15 years old. What could you have done?" "Something. Anything. I could have told Pa I wouldn't let him do it. I could have made a scene, brought attention to how wrong it was. I could have—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "You're my sister, Eliza. I loved you. I still love you. And I let them sell you." "You didn't let them do anything," Eliza said gently. "Pa made his choice, and Ma supported it, and that was that. You couldn't have stopped them any more than I could have." "Are you happy?" Thomas asked suddenly, looking past her to the boys in the wagon. "With the Thatchers? Are they treating you well?" "I'm happier than I've ever been," Eliza said honestly. "Those boys have become my sons. Their sister is my daughter. Their father gave me something I never thought I'd have, a home where I'm valued. So yes, Thomas, I'm very well treated." Relief flooded her brother's face. "I'm glad. I'm so glad, Eliza. I was so afraid that I'd ended up with someone cruel, someone who'd hurt me." Eliza shook her head. "Bo Thatcher is a good man, the best man I've ever known, actually. He saved me, Thomas. Not from Pa. From myself. From believing I was worthless." Thomas reached out hesitantly, and when Eliza didn't pull away, he pulled her into a fierce hug. "I miss you," he whispered into her hair. "The house is so quiet without you. Ma doesn't talk anymore, just sits and stares. And Pa drinks more than ever." "I'm sorry," Eliza said, meaning it, "but I can't come back, Thomas. That's not my home anymore." "I know. Can I visit you? At the ranch? I want to make sure you're all right, and I want to meet your new family properly." Eliza pulled back, considering. "Let me talk to Bo first. But yes, I'd like that. I'd like for you to see that I'm truly happy." They parted with promises to arrange a visit, and Eliza climbed back onto the wagon feeling lighter somehow. She'd faced her demons today, Mrs. Pemberton's cruelty, the town's judgment, her own family's complicated feelings, and she'd survived. More than survived. She'd stood her ground. "Mama?" Matthew said as they left Ash Ridge behind. "Was that your brother?" "Yes, that was Thomas." "Is he nice? Can we trust him?" The fierce protectiveness in Matthew's voice made Eliza smile. "He's nice, yes. And he's family, both my old family and potentially part of our new family, if he'd like to be." "Our family's getting bigger," Nathaniel observed happily. "First we got you, now maybe we'll get an uncle too." James, more practical, said, "Pa will want to know about the incident at the store, about Mrs. Pemberton." "I'll tell him," Eliza assured him. "All of it. He deserves to know." They rode home in comfortable silence, the afternoon sun beating down, but the wagon full of supplies, and the children full of pride in their mother's bravery. When they finally pulled up to the ranch, Bo was waiting on the porch, clearly anxious about how the trip had gone. One look at Eliza's face, and his shoulders relaxed. "No trouble?" "Some trouble," Eliza admitted, climbing down. "But nothing we couldn't handle. Boys, help unload these supplies. Your father and I need to talk." The boys scattered with the efficiency of well-trained soldiers, and Eliza followed Bo around to the back of the house, where they could have privacy. She told him everything. Mrs. Pemberton's venom, the boys' fierce defense, her own confrontation with the older woman, and finally, the unexpected reunion with Thomas. Bo listened in silence, his face unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the distant mountains. "I should have gone with you," he said finally. "I needed to do this myself," Eliza countered. "I needed to prove to them and to myself that I'm not the broken woman they sold 6 weeks ago." "You were never broken," Bo said, turning to look at her with those winter sky eyes. but I understand needing to prove it to yourself." He paused. "Your brother, do you want him to visit? If it's all right with you, he's the only family I have left who doesn't think I'm cursed." "Of course it's all right. This is your home, Eliza. You can invite whoever you want." Bo hesitated, then added, "The boys defended you well." "Like little warriors," Eliza agreed with a smile. "They were ready to take on the whole town for my honor." "They love you." "I love them too, more than I ever thought possible." Something shifted in Bo's expression at that, something she couldn't quite name. He took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his sun-heated skin. "Eliza, I need to tell you something. I've been trying to find the right words for weeks now, but there never seems to be a right time, and—" "Pa! Mama!" Mira's voice rang out from the house. "Come quick, Levi's talking." They rushed inside to find all 5 children gathered in the main room, staring at Levi with expressions of shock and delight. The quiet boy stood in the center of them, his face flushed but his eyes bright. "What happened?" Bo demanded. "Levi, son, are you all right?" "I'm fine, Pa," Levi said in his soft, careful voice. "I just wanted to tell Mama something important, and it felt like the words were ready to come out, so I let them." "What did you want to tell me, sweetheart?" Eliza asked, kneeling down to his level. Levi looked at her with those enormous, solemn eyes. "I wanted to say thank you for staying when Mama Mira was sick, for loving us even though we're not yours by blood, for being brave today in town when people were mean. You're a good mama, and I'm glad Pa brought you home." Eliza's vision blurred with tears. "Oh, Levi, my sweet boy. I'm glad he brought me home too. So very glad." Levi stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her neck, hugging her with the fierce intensity of a child who'd been saving up affection for months. Eliza held him tight, feeling the last piece of her new family click into place. That evening, after the children were fed and bathed and tucked into bed, after the kitchen was cleaned and the house settled into nighttime quiet, Eliza found herself once again on the back porch with Bo. They'd fallen into this habit over the weeks, sharing the end of the day together, talking over coffee or just sitting in companionable silence. Tonight Bo seemed nervous, his coffee untouched in Catherine's cup that Eliza had insisted he reclaim for himself. "You said you needed to tell me something earlier," Eliza prompted gently. Before Levi interrupted. "Yes." Bo set down his cup and turned to face her fully. "Eliza, I want you to know that I never intended, that is, when I brought you here, I only meant to hire help, someone to care for the children while I worked. That's all." "I know that," Eliza said, confused by where this was going. "But somewhere along the way things changed. You changed from hired help to family. The children changed from tolerating you to loving you. And I—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm making a mess of this." "Bo, just say what you need to say." He met her eyes, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I'm not ready to marry again. Maybe I never will be. Catherine she was everything to me, and losing her nearly destroyed me. I can't imagine trying to build that kind of love again." Eliza's heart sank, even though she'd never dared to hope for anything beyond what they already had. "I understand. But," Bo continued, reaching out to take her hand, "I want you to know that you're not just hired help anymore. You're not just the woman who cares for my children. You're part of this family, Eliza, permanently, whether I ever marry again or not. Whether you stay as the children's mother or eventually decide to build a life elsewhere, you'll always have a home here. You'll always have us. Do you understand?" "I'm not going anywhere," Eliza whispered. "This is my home. You're my family. I don't need marriage or a title beyond Mama. I just need this life we've built together." Relief flooded Bo's face. "Good. That's good. I just needed you to know that you're secure here, that I'm not going to suddenly decide I don't need you anymore, or that you've fulfilled your purpose and can leave. You're ours, Eliza, for as long as you want to be." "Forever then," Eliza said, squeezing his hand. "I want to be yours forever." They sat together in the darkness, holding hands like children seeking comfort, like friends bound by something deeper than romance. And overhead, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, bearing witness to a family that had been broken and was slowly, painfully, beautifully healing itself back together. Inside the house, 5 children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that their mama would be there in the morning and the morning after that, and all the mornings stretching out into a future that finally felt safe. And on the back porch, 2 adults who'd each lost everything found themselves grateful for what they'd found in each other. Not passion, perhaps, but partnership. Not romance, but respect. Not the love songs promised, but something steadier, something that just might last. Autumn arrived with unexpected gentleness, the brutal summer heat giving way to cooler mornings and evenings painted in shades of gold. The change in seasons brought its own rhythm to the ranch. Harvest time, preparations for winter, the constant cycle of work that never truly ended but shifted its focus with the turning of the year. Eliza had been with the Thatchers for 4 months now, and the transformation was complete. She no longer felt like an outsider looking in, no longer questioned her right to make decisions or discipline the children or rearrange the kitchen to suit her preferences. This was her home. These were her children, and she'd earned every inch of belonging through sweat and tears and stubborn refusal to give up. The garden had become her special project, the one place where she could pour her energy into creating something from nothing. Catherine's garden had died during those first grief-stricken months after her death, untended, unwatered, left to wither in the harsh New Mexico sun. Eliza had spent weeks clearing the dead plants, turning the soil, coaxing life back into earth that had gone dormant. It was grueling work. The drought that had settled over the territory made every drop of water precious, every seed a gamble. But Eliza refused to let the garden die completely. She hauled water from the well until her arms ached, rigged shade cloths to protect tender seedlings from the worst of the sun, talked to her plants the way she'd once heard Catherine had done, as if encouragement alone could will them to grow. Most of what she planted struggled. The lettuce bolted immediately. The squash vines produced more leaves than fruit. The carrots came up twisted and small, barely worth the effort of pulling them. But in one corner of the garden, against all odds and logic, a single tomato plant had taken root and thrived. Eliza discovered the first tomato on a morning when everything else seemed to be going wrong. James had torn his only good shirt on a fence post. Matthew had gotten into an argument with Nathaniel over whose turn it was to feed the chickens. Mira had woken up crying from a nightmare about her mother that left her clingy and inconsolable. And Bo had been distant for days, preoccupied with something he wouldn't discuss, his usual steady presence replaced by distracted silences. She'd escaped to the garden seeking a moment of peace, and found instead a miracle, one perfect red tomato, impossibly bright against the dusty green of its vine, round and ripe and beautiful. Eliza knelt beside it, her fingers trembling as she touched the smooth skin, and felt tears sliding down her cheeks before she'd even realized she was crying. "You made it," she whispered to the tomato, to the garden, to herself. "Despite everything, you made it." "Eliza?" She looked up to find Bo standing at the garden's edge, his hat in his hands, his expression concerned. She hadn't heard him approach, had been too lost in her moment of unexpected victory. "I'm fine," she said quickly, wiping at her tears with dirt-stained hands. "Just being silly over a tomato." "That's not silly," Bo said, moving closer. "That's the first thing we've successfully grown since Catherine died. She'd be proud of you for bringing the garden back to life." "It's just one tomato," Eliza protested. "Everything else is barely surviving." "But this one is thriving," Bo countered, kneeling beside her. "And you taught it how to do that. You didn't give up on it, even when the drought made everything harder, even when it would have been easier to let the whole garden go and buy our vegetables from town." I couldn't let it die completely," Eliza said softly. "This garden was Catherine's. She planted it, nurtured it, fed her family from it. Letting it die felt like letting another piece of her disappear." Bo reached out and gently took her dirt-covered hand in his. "You know what Catherine used to say about the garden?" "What?" "She said that growing things was an act of faith, that you put seeds in the ground, not knowing if they'd sprout, you water them, not knowing if they'll thrive, you tend them through drought and heat and every kind of hardship because you believe that life wants to persist, that given even the smallest chance, things that should die will choose to live instead." Eliza looked at their joined hands, his calloused and scarred from years of ranch work, hers marked with fresh dirt and old burns from the kitchen. She was wise. She was, Bo agreed. And she'd recognize that same wisdom in you, Eliza. You're doing the same thing with this family that you did with this garden. You took something that was dying and gave it a reason to live again. I didn't do it alone. You were here. The children were here. We were surviving, Bo interrupted, just barely making it from one day to the next. You taught us how to thrive again, how to find joy in small things, how to believe that life could be good even after loss. He paused, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. I need to tell you something I should have told you weeks ago. Eliza's heart started beating faster. What is it? Before Bo could answer, Matthew's voice rang out from the house. Mama, Mama, there's people coming. Fancy people in a wagon. Bo stood quickly, pulling Eliza to her feet. They moved to the front of the house where all 5 children had gathered on the porch, staring at an approaching wagon that was indeed far fancier than anything usually seen on ranch roads. As it drew closer, Eliza recognized the driver, Samuel Hutchins, a lawyer from Santa Fe who occasionally did business in Ash Ridge, but it was the passengers who made her breath catch. 2 men in suits that cost more than most families earned in a year, their faces serious and official. Stay with the children, Bo said quietly. Let me handle this. But Eliza had a sinking feeling that whatever these men wanted, it involved her. She gathered the children close, her arms around Mira and Nathaniel, while the older boys flanked her protectively. Samuel Hutchins climbed down from the wagon, doffing his hat respectfully. Mr. Thatcher, Mrs. Thatcher, my apologies for arriving unannounced, but these gentlemen insisted on making the journey as soon as they heard. He gestured to his passengers, who were descending with the careful movements of men unused to wagon travel. This is Mr. Theodore Carlyle and Mr. James Worth, representatives of the Territorial Family Court. Eliza's stomach dropped. Family Court. That meant only one thing. Someone was challenging her place here, claiming she had no legal right to these children. What's this about? Bo's voice was level, but Eliza could see the tension in his shoulders. Mr. Carlyle, the older of the 2 officials, stepped forward. Mr. Thatcher, we've received a formal complaint regarding the welfare of your children. Specifically, concerns have been raised about the unusual circumstances under which you acquired Miss Eliza Moreland as their caregiver. Mrs. Thatcher, James said sharply, she's our mother. I understand that's what you call her, son, Mr. Carlyle said with practiced gentleness. But legally speaking, there's no adoption papers, no marriage certificate, no formal arrangement that gives Miss Moreland any legal standing as your guardian. The complaint suggests that your father essentially purchased a woman in a public auction and installed her in his home with 5 children. That's concerning from a legal standpoint. Who filed the complaint? Bo demanded. Mr. Worth consulted a paper. A Mrs. Agnes Pemberton of Ash Ridge. She claims to be the grandmother of one Harold Pemberton, deceased, who was formerly married to Miss Moreland. She's arguing that a woman who was sold like property, who failed to produce children in a legitimate marriage, has no business raising children unsupervised. That's a lie, Matthew shouted. Mama's the best. She saved Mira's life. She takes care of us better than anyone. Matthew, inside, Eliza said quietly. All of you, inside the house. But Mama, inside now. Let your father and me handle this. The children reluctantly obeyed, though she could see faces pressed against the windows immediately, watching with fearful eyes. Once they were gone, Eliza turned to face the officials with her head held high. Mrs. Pemberton has never forgiven me for not giving her grandchildren, she said clearly. Her son's death was convenient ammunition, but this isn't about my fitness as a mother. This is about revenge for not fulfilling her expectations. Be that as it may, Mr. Carlyle said, we're obligated to investigate any formal complaint regarding child welfare. We'll need to inspect the home, interview the children, and assess whether they're being properly cared for. Of course, Bo said tightly. You're welcome to inspect whatever you need, but I want it on record that Eliza has been the best thing to happen to this family since my wife died. My children love her. She's transformed our home, and if you try to take her from us, you'll have a fight on your hands. No one's talking about taking anyone anywhere yet, Mr. Thatcher, Samuel Hutchins interjected. Let's all take a breath and handle this professionally. The next 2 hours were excruciating. The officials went through every room of the house, making notes about cleanliness and organization. They checked the children's sleeping arrangements, examined their clothes for signs of wear or neglect, looked through the pantry to assess food supplies. They questioned each child separately, asking about their daily routines, whether they were happy, whether they felt safe, whether Eliza had ever mistreated them in any way. Eliza stood in the kitchen the whole time, her hands gripped so tightly together that her knuckles had gone white. Bo stayed close, a solid presence at her shoulder, but even his support couldn't calm the terror rising in her chest. They were going to take her away. She'd finally found a home, a family, a purpose, and it was going to be ripped from her because of one bitter woman's vendetta. When the officials finally emerged, the children trailing behind them with tear-stained faces, Mr. Carlyle's expression was unreadable. "Based on our investigation," he said formally, "we've found the following. The home is exceptionally well maintained. The children are clean, well-fed, and properly clothed. They show no signs of physical abuse or neglect. In fact, they appear to be thriving under Miss Moreland's care." Relief flooded through Eliza so powerfully she nearly collapsed. Bo's hand steadied her elbow. "However," Mr. Carlyle continued, and the relief turned to ice, "the legal irregularity of the situation remains concerning. Miss Moreland has no formal standing as these children's guardian. If something were to happen to you, Mr. Thatcher, she'd have no legal claim to them. They could be taken by relatives, sent to an orphanage, or distributed among other families. That's not a stable situation for children who've already lost one parent." "Then tell me what I need to do to fix it," Bo said urgently. "Whatever legal paperwork you need, whatever arrangements have to be made, I'll do it. Just tell me how to protect her place in this family." Mr. Worth and Mr. Carlyle exchanged glances. "The simplest solution would be marriage," Mr. Worth said. "If Miss Moreland were your legal wife, her position as the children's mother would be unassailable. No one could challenge it." "Then we'll marry," Bo said without hesitation. Eliza's heart stopped. "Bo, no, you said you weren't ready. You said you might never be ready." "I also said you were part of this family permanently," Bo countered, turning to face her. "I meant that, Eliza. If marrying you is what it takes to keep you here, to protect you from people like Agnes Pemberton, then that's what we'll do." "But that's not— You can't marry me just to satisfy a legal technicality," Eliza protested. "You loved Catherine. You said you couldn't imagine building that kind of love again. I won't trap you in a loveless marriage just because some spiteful woman filed a complaint." "Who said anything about loveless?" Bo asked quietly. The world seemed to tilt. Eliza stared at him, unable to process what he was suggesting. "What?" "I loved Catherine," Bo said, his winter sky eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her forget anyone else was present. "I'll always love Catherine. She was my first love, the mother of my children, the woman who built this home. But Eliza, somewhere in the last 4 months, I've come to love you too. Differently, maybe. Not the same passionate rush I felt at 20, but something steadier. Something that feels like coming home after a long day, like coffee on a cold morning, like a tomato that shouldn't grow but does anyway," Eliza whispered, understanding flooding through her. "Exactly like that," Bo agreed. "You took root in impossible soil, Eliza. In a house full of grief, in a family that was barely surviving, in a man who thought he'd never feel anything but loss again. And despite everything, you thrived. You made us thrive. And I don't want to imagine a life without you in it." "Ma, I love you too," Eliza said, the words spilling out before she could second-guess them. "I didn't mean to. I wasn't supposed to. But I do. I love you, and I love those children, and I love this life we've built together." "Then marry me," Bo said, "not because the law requires it, though that's convenient. Not because you need legal protection, though you do. Marry me because I'm asking you to, because I want you as my partner in everything, because I choose you every single day, and I want the world to know it." "Yes," Eliza breathed. "Yes. Of course, yes." The kiss that followed was witnessed by 2 officials, 1 lawyer, and 5 children pressed against the windows, and it was perfect, gentle, and certain, and full of promise. Mr. Carlyle cleared his throat loudly. "Well, that was efficient. I assume you'll want us to perform the ceremony. We have the authority to marry couples in emergency circumstances, and I'd say this qualifies." "How soon?" Bo asked, not taking his eyes off Eliza. "We could do it right now, actually. We'd need 2 witnesses who aren't the couple or related to them." "I'll witness," Samuel Hutchins volunteered immediately, "and I'm sure one of the ranch hands could serve as the second witness." "Ranch hands are all out in the far pasture today," Bo said. "Won't be back until sundown." "Your brother could witness," Eliza said suddenly. "Thomas. He wanted to visit anyway, and this way he could be part of it. If someone could ride to Ash Ridge—" "I'll go," James volunteered, bursting from the house. "I'll ride fast, Mama. I'll bring him back before supper." "We really should resolve this today," Mr. Carlyle said. "The complaint remains active until we can report back that the situation has been legally rectified." "Then, James, ride fast but ride safe," Bo instructed. "Bring Thomas back if he's willing. And tell him his sister is getting married and we'd be honored to have him here." James was already running for the barn, his young face split with a grin. The other children spilled out of the house, chattering excitedly, asking 1,000 questions at once. Mira attached herself to Eliza's leg with the tenacity of a burr. "Are you really marrying Pa?" she demanded. "Does that mean you'll be our mama forever and ever? Does that mean nobody can take you away?" "That's exactly what it means, sweetheart," Eliza said, scooping the little girl up. "Forever and ever, no one can take me away from you." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The officials made themselves comfortable on the porch, reviewing paperwork and discussing legal formalities. Matthew and Nathaniel were dispatched to tidy the house. "It needs to look nice for a wedding," Nathaniel insisted. Levi, in his quiet way, picked wildflowers from the areas around the garden and fashioned them into a simple bouquet. And Mira insisted on helping Eliza change into her church dress, the good blue cotton that had belonged to Catherine. "Mama Catherine would want you to wear it," Mira said seriously, smoothing the fabric. "She'd be happy that Pa found you. She'd want him to be happy again." "Do you really think so?" Eliza asked, her throat tight with emotion. "I know so," Mira said with the absolute certainty of childhood. "I asked her last night in my prayers, and she told me. She said to tell you thank you for taking care of us, and that she's glad we're going to be a real family now." Eliza gathered the little girl close, tears streaming down her face. "I'm glad too, baby girl. So very glad." Thomas arrived just as the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains, dusty from the ride and wide-eyed at the chaos he'd entered. James had explained the situation during the journey, so he came prepared with congratulations and barely contained excitement. "You're happy?" he asked Eliza privately, searching her face for any sign of doubt. "This is what you want?" "More than anything," Eliza assured him. "I know it probably seems rushed and under strange circumstances, but Thomas, I love him. I love this family. This is where I belong." "Then I'm happy for you," Thomas said, pulling her into a hug. "You deserve this, Eliza. After everything Pa and Ma put you through, after everything this town said about you, you deserve to be loved." The ceremony itself was simple but profound. They gathered in front of the house as the sunset painted the sky in impossible colors, the whole family arranged around them. Mr. Carlyle spoke the words with surprising gentleness, his official formality softening in the face of such obvious affection. "Do you, Beauregard Thatcher, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Bo said clearly, his eyes never leaving Eliza's face. "And do you, Eliza Moreland, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Eliza whispered, her voice thick with tears. "By the authority granted to me by the territory of New Mexico, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." The kiss was witnessed by 5 cheering children, 1 beaming brother, 2 pleased officials, and 1 satisfied lawyer, and it felt like sealing a promise that had been made weeks ago but was only now being formalized. When they broke apart, Bo rested his forehead against hers and murmured, "Hello, Mrs. Thatcher." "Hello, Mr. Thatcher," Eliza replied, laughing through her tears. The children swarmed them immediately, demanding hugs and attention and reassurance that this meant everything was settled now, that Mama was theirs forever, that the mean lady from town couldn't take her away. Eliza held each one, promised them everything they needed to hear, felt the last piece of her broken heart click into place. After the officials and Samuel Hutchins had departed, taking with them official documentation of the marriage that would close Mrs. Pemberton's complaint permanently, and after Thomas had ridden home with promises to visit again soon, the newly expanded Thatcher family gathered around the dinner table for a celebratory meal. Eliza had prepared Catherine's special pot roast recipe, and dessert was a single perfect tomato, sliced and shared among 7 people with reverence usually reserved for communion. "This is the best tomato I've ever tasted," Nathaniel declared around his mouthful. "That's because Mama grew it," Mira said proudly. "She made it grow when everything else was dying." "She taught us that sometimes the most important things are the ones that seem impossible at first," James added, his 12-year-old wisdom making him sound far older. "Like making a garden grow in a drought, or making a family heal after losing someone, or finding love when you thought you'd lost the ability to feel it." Bo reached across the table and took Eliza's hand, squeezing gently. "Your brother's getting philosophical in his old age." "He's right, though," Eliza said. "All the best things are the ones that shouldn't work but do anyway. Like this family, like this life, like us." After dinner, after the children had been tucked into bed with extra hugs and reassurances, after the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Eliza and Bo found themselves once again on the back porch, sharing the end of the day together. But tonight was different. Tonight they sat closer, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "I was trying to figure out how to ask you," Bo said into the comfortable silence, "before those officials showed up. I'd been working on it for weeks, trying to find the right words, the right moment. I wanted to do it properly, romantically, not as a response to a legal threat." "I don't care about romantic gestures," Eliza said. "I care that you meant it, that you weren't just saying it to satisfy Mr. Carlyle." "I meant every word," Bo assured her. "Catherine taught me that love doesn't have to look the same every time, that you can love someone with passion and fire, and you can love someone else with steadiness and comfort, and both kinds of love are real. Both kinds matter." "I'll never try to replace her," Eliza promised, "in your heart or in this house." "You're not replacing her," Bo said gently. "You're writing a new chapter. Catherine was the story of my youth, my first great love, the mother who gave my children life. You're the story of my second chance, the woman who taught me that life continues even after loss, the mother who gave my children hope. There's room for both stories in one life." They sat together watching the stars emerge, talking quietly about their hopes for the future, making plans for the ranch and the children and the garden that would need replanting in spring. And as the night deepened and the desert sang its ancient song, they moved inside together for the first time as husband and wife, ready to build on the foundation they'd been constructing since that day in Ash Ridge, when a desperate man paid $1 for a woman the world had decided was worthless. The years that followed were not easy. Ranch life never was. And raising 5 children through adolescence into adulthood presented challenges that no amount of love could completely smooth over. But through it all, through droughts and good harvests, through children's triumphs and heartbreaks, through the slow mellowing that came with age and experience, Eliza and Bo built something that lasted. The garden flourished under Eliza's patient care, eventually producing enough vegetables to feed the family and sell surplus in town. Matthew grew into a fine young man, his anger transformed into passion for justice that led him to study law. James took over more and more of the ranch operations, his steady competence a mirror of his father's. Levi found his voice, and with it, a talent for storytelling that kept the family entertained on long winter nights. The twins, inseparable as always, grew into capable adults who never quite lost their childhood joy. And when travelers passed the Thatcher Ranch in later years, they would slow their wagons to read the hand-carved sign by the fence, "Not for sale," and wonder at its meaning. The locals knew the story, of course, how Bo Thatcher had bought his second wife for a single dollar in a public auction, how she'd arrived broken and left whole, how she'd taken a dying garden and a grief-stricken family and loved them back to life through sheer stubborn refusal to give up. Some said the sign referred to the ranch itself, a declaration that no amount of money could convince the Thatchers to abandon the land they'd worked so hard to maintain. Others claimed it was about the garden, about Eliza's fierce protection of the space she'd brought back from the dead. A few romantic souls insisted it was about love itself, a reminder that the best things in life, once freely chosen, could never be bought or sold. They were all right, in their way. On summer evenings, long after the children had grown and started families of their own, Eliza and Bo could still be found on that back porch, gray-haired and weathered, but content in ways that had nothing to do with ease and everything to do with choosing each other every day for decades. They'd share coffee from the old tin cups, Catherine's with its scratched flower, and Eliza's that Levi had given her that first week, and talk about the day's work and the grandchildren's latest adventures, and whether the garden would need extra water tomorrow. And sometimes when the light was right and the evening air carried the scent of tomatoes ripening in the garden, Eliza would remember standing on that platform in Ash Ridge, being sold like cattle, believing her life was over. She'd remember the tall rancher who'd stepped forward with a single silver dollar and a promise that she wouldn't be judged anymore. She'd remember 5 grieving children who'd taught her that family was a choice, not an accident of biology. And she'd remember the moment she'd understood that broken things could still grow, that impossible soil could still nurture life, that a woman worth $1 could become priceless through the simple act of staying. "What are you thinking about?" Bo would ask, seeing that distant look in her eyes. "Just grateful," Eliza would reply, taking his hand. "Grateful for the man who saw value where others saw only deficiency. Grateful for the children who taught me that love multiplies instead of divides. Grateful for a single tomato that reminded me that not everything worth keeping comes easy. But it does come," Bo would finish, squeezing her hand. "Yes," Eliza would agree, watching the sun set over the land they'd built a life on together. "Eventually, it comes." And in the garden, where Catherine's hands had first broken ground and Eliza's had coaxed it back to life, tomatoes grew wild and bright, bearing fruit long past the season when such things should have withered and died. Because that's what love did, in the end. It made impossible things possible. It nurtured life in the harshest conditions. It transformed one silver dollar into riches beyond measure. The sign by the fence, "Not for sale," stood for generations, its meaning clear to anyone who cared to understand. Some things, once freely chosen and faithfully tended, become so valuable that no price could ever purchase them. Not land, not gardens, not family, and certainly not love.